is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Are these stocks under-owned by institutional Wall Street?
A lot of these companies talking about generative AI.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Investors just worried about that ongoing sales slump in China.
And Michael Barr with news.
A ship traveling through the southern Red Sea has been attacked.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney. Middle of earnings season, deep into technology earnings. After Tesla, we'll talk about that in a moment. It's exciting. Microsoft tomorrow, Boeing this morning, Ford this morning. Tesla we're going to dive into. Dan Ives scheduled to be with me, Mr. Teeter here to get us started. What's your message so far? Mine's like, okay, it's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I listened into that conference call yesterday for Tesla, like I said I would. And Elon Musk, you either believe him or you don't. If you believe him, you buy the stock here, and the stock is bidding up 12% pre-market. If you're a little bit skeptical, then you're going to be more of kind of the wait and see. Let's see if you can deliver this lower cost car at a profitability.
Red and green on the screen. Let's not forget the economic data. We're going into that Thursday, Friday. Paul, you mentioned the PCE data, which I guess is a Fed inflation statistic, but what's the what if we actually get a reversion, the housing inflation comes down and we revert back to disinflation?
Yeah, if we revert back to disinflation, maybe this Fed can, in fact, be a little bit more aggressive on the rate cuts. Right now, the market's been dialing it back. We started the year with 6 rate cuts, Tom. Now we're down to maybe less than 2 for this year. So the market has certainly adjusted its outlook.
Good morning on Apple CarPlay, Android Play as well. The Bloomberg Business app, you download it for free. Growing each and every day. It's very, Jumana's going to be on with this from Dubai, and she was telling me it's very international.
Yeah.
Apple CarPlay, she's got in the Bentley.
Of course. Well, I mean, they're giving them away over there.
Well, they are. I think she bought it I don't know if it's new or used, but over there, a used Bentley, there's like 400 on the lot.
Yep, exactly.
Get the little pennants out there flying.
Exactly.
Next trip to Abu Dhabi. Yep. Anyways, Jumana will be with us, and just lots to talk about here. This morning, an important discussion with Laura Davidson from Washington. We'll have that to you shortly. We're in the Interactive Broker Studios. We're on YouTube. Search Bloomberg Podcast. I'm not in the live chat yet. I'll get in the live chat right now with our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. Futures right now, they're mixed. This is Wall Street shifts their attention to earnings. Yes, over geopolitics, interest rate plans. The NASDAQ leading the charge. It's up 0.5% right now. A big part of that, Tesla. I want to check in with their shares. Right now, they are up about 11%. And the company announced this big shortfall in its first quarter earnings sales margins. But here's the thing. It said it's moving up production of those less expensive EVs to this year. So investors like the sound of that. We have more earnings coming in this morning. AT&T up 2%. They topped estimates for profit in the first quarter. It added more wireless phone customers than expected. And you have Hilton. They're up 3%. Reported earnings beat forecasts. Growth in international travel actually helped make up for slowing demand in the U.S. Then we have all eyes focused later after the bell. Meta opens its books right now. Meta's up about 2%. Microsoft and Alphabet, they are set to report tomorrow. Over to the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.93%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.63%, and that's up 3 basis points. Finally, commodity spot gold lower, $2,316 an ounce, and Brent crude at $87 a barrel. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Paul, out on YouTube on live chat, they're apoplectic.
Are they?
They said the lights weren't on.
I know. Rich, reading the IB, jumps to action, turns on the lights.
The lights are on. Good morning on YouTube. Sometimes with the way we look, we want the lights off. Why don't you bring in Jen? He's in the market.
Exactly. All right, Robert Teeter joins us. He's head of investment policy and the strategy over at Silvercrest Asset Management. Hey, Robert, I mean, we're kind of getting into the teeth of earnings here. What have you seen? What do you need to see? What does this market need to see from earnings this quarter?
Well, I think there's a high burden on earnings this quarter, especially because we've got the Fed and the economy and inflation all sort of at a loggerheads without much motion. What we're seeing so far in earnings season is sort of one set of bad things and one set of good things. I'll end on the good because I'm more of an optimist and have a strong outlook here. The only thing to be a little bit concerned about is you're seeing some signs of certain income strata slowing a bit. So whether it's across restaurant companies or airlines, you're starting to see just a little bit of commentary about some segments being very strong, premium, business travel, things like that, and other areas being a little bit weaker.
Yeah.
That's the sign to keep an eye out for. But overall, very positive. Earnings are beating by a pretty healthy margin. Margins are surprising as well, and I think that's one of the key stories here. Companies are finding a way to make money even with that slowing demand in some portions.
Paul, do we like anecdotes?
Yeah, love it.
I just had a family member upgrade to business class, Paris to Newark, for $599.
Really?
I've never heard of that.
No, I've heard like
That's
thousands.
how many empty seats there are. Just one little tea leaf, exactly what Mr. Teeter's talking about.
So, Robert, given that backdrop, what is our Federal Reserve to do here? I mean, one could argue that the economy's pretty darn strong and they can just kind of sit pat here for a while. They don't have to do anything. Yet it is an election year, and you got to factor that in as well.
The Fed's in a really tough position here. The economy is quite strong, even though there are a few signs of slowing. And inflation is really in a difficult spot as well. We mentioned housing earlier. That's a big anchor to where inflation has been. That's been a giant component across PCE and CPI. It's coming down quite slowly. It's down about 0.7 or so over the last year. So it's moving down, moving in the right direction, but very, very slowly. So it puts the Fed in a spot where they have to be incredibly patient, and they have that November date to look out for. So we're hopeful that the next few reads come in line or a little bit better. That lays the groundwork. I think it takes them some time to move as well. They haven't really made a case for why they would cut, and to me that takes a meeting or two before they cut.
Okay.
Ken Fellio does our morning opening, our show opening, and he
mornings.
does a great job on it. He makes me sound smart, and there's some point where I say, are these stocks under-owned? I'm just looking on the Bloomberg terminal. Folks, you can do this with a classic DES description screen. And I'm looking at Apple, 67% institutional, Microsoft more, 76%, NVIDIA, granted it's new, 71% ownership. Are those stocks under-owned by the traditional buy-side, long-only street?
There are a lot of different ways to look at it, but one that I do is look at holdings across the various big mutual funds and see whether they have under or overweight positions. A lot of times those bigger names are under-owned. There are sometimes position limits, 5%, 6%, and some of these bigger names, especially at Microsoft, you can get an underweight position just because of position size limits. Some of the others...
The prospectus says you can't own the makeup of Microsoft and the Standard & Poor's 500.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we do here? I mean, again, I'm looking at a market that's higher, that is discounting, I guess, some type of rate declines at some point this year. Earnings are coming in decent. What do I buy here? Do I just stick with the magnificent whatever they are these days, or do I try to go out and be a little bit smarter than the market?
I think it's a good time to start broadening out. It may not start with this quarter's earnings because the catalyst really will be the interest rate cuts whenever they show up, whether that's unlikely in June, possible in July, maybe more likely in September. But time to start positioning for that now. We also think some of the technology gains and margin improvement will start to spread throughout larger segments of market caps as well as some of these tools get implemented more broadly.
Like AI, for example, A, is it real? B, will corporate America benefit from a margin perspective? Is that something we can really hang our hat on, do you think?
I think it will happen. The early wave of it has been a lot of enthusiasm and around a very narrow segment of stocks. But some of the applications are real. They're early, and it will take some time to filter through. And so as time marches on, I think we'll see broader application and broader benefit from that technology.
There's enough fossildom in this room to remember when 10% correction was hoped for. Gave you a new chance to reset, readjust, and find a selective purchase of shares. Okay, fine. What's the nature of this 4% pullback we've seen?
Well, I think this has been a very interesting pullback because we've had a very large move in rates this year, up 60 basis points or so from the beginning of the year. We're still positive. The last time we had that type of move in rates, the market was down close to 10%, and we got that full correction. The interesting thing here is that rates are headed higher, valuations have compressed, but earnings have really come through. So it makes it sort of a marking time and improving just just a little bit on the basis of marking time rather than a correction.
Thank you for coming by.
Yeah,
great to be here.
What's Microsoft going to do tomorrow? Any clue?
My crystal ball's a little cloudy.
The conference call will be more interesting than Mr. Musk's conference call. Robert Teeter, thank you so much. Silvercrest Asset Management. Futures, red and green on the screen. Futures up 6. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. The Senate passed the long-awaited foreign aid bill. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
$95 billion in foreign aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. The package includes 4 bills that passed the House over the weekend with bipartisan votes. The Senate votes also overwhelming support. It does include the divest bill for TikTok. Now, not included is the border package that Republicans had demanded for months. Senator Lindsey Graham says this one had to go.
The fact that we did not get provisions for our border, in my view, doesn't mean we can't deal with the other problems the world faces. We actually have to.
Now, the president has said all along that he will sign this package. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
The Supreme Court is considering a case that will determine when doctors can provide abortions during medical emergencies in states with bans enacted after the High Court's sweeping decision overturning Roe v. Wade. Today's hearing comes from Idaho, which is one of 14 states that now ban abortion at all stages of pregnancy, with limited exceptions. Meanwhile, President Biden campaigned in Tampa, Florida, just days before a 6-week abortion ban is set to take effect. The ban would be one of the strictest in the U.S. and would outlaw abortions after 6 weeks. Biden responding to a Republican argument that the reversal of Roe v. Wade 2 years ago delivered the issue of abortion access back to the states.
It shouldn't matter where in America you live. This isn't about states' rights, it's about women's rights.
The president says abortion should be a federal constitutional right. So far this year, there have been 125 measles cases reported across 17 states, according to the most recent CDC figures. The agency calls the rapid increase a renewed threat to elimination. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Sportico writing up the business of hockey. And I know Michael Barr's had this, Paul, on Bloomberg Business Sports. 100% capacity, 15 clubs, Minnesota, Vegas, Nashville, Carolina, Colorado, Boston, Dallas, Seattle, Tampa, no surprise, Montreal, and the Rangers. It's amazing. They're up in ticket sales, and they start out the season with some good ratings.
Yeah, it's amazing. This is what I understand about the hockey business is that the audience is obviously smaller than the NFL, the NBA, but boy, are they passionate. Yeah. I find it when I walk through Penn Station going home at night, and it's a Rangers game, the number of young women that are coming to the games. Oh, yeah. They got all the regalia. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Lisa Mateo's embarrassing. She comes in the day the Rangers play. She's got a Messier jersey. Yep. And all that. I mean, to me, Michael Barr, what's so cool here about it is it's the Rangers, the big city. I get it, the media. Imagine what the Knicks will do if the Knicks extend.
Can you imagine what the Garden's going to look like if both those teams advance? You can't even get it. Forget about trying to get in. You can't even breathe the air around.
Well, the seats you had the other night were what, 2,800 each?
Yeah, I mean, I know a guy. The thing about this, Jim Dolan and Madison Square Garden, the Knicks, the Rangers, Billy Joel this week, every single night they are killing it at MSG.
Can I say something?
It's unbelievable.
The food's pretty good.
Oh,
I mean, the food is like
and
really,
you pay
really.
for it, though. I mean,
you pay for it.
The $4 Budweiser's a thing of the past.
But I can't. The Mets, the food is good. Yankee Stadium. Make a switch. You need Fenway Franks at Yankee Stadium. I mean, that's what. I know. I'm sorry. Yankees need up.
They've up.
Do we have the studio lights on yet? I can't tell.
Rich came to the rescue.
You look great.
Lisa, you look great this morning.
Thank you.
I mean,
it's the yellow.
Out on YouTube, Bloomberg Podcast. Look for Lisa Mateo when you go to Bloomberg Podcast. It's like Lisa and the 3 backup singers. That's what it looks like. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got red and green on the screen. NASDAQ futures up 0.5%, but we have Dow futures, little change. S&P futures, they're up just 0.1%. The bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.95%, up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.64%, up 4 basis points. To commodities we go. Spot gold lower at $2,314 an ounce, and we have Brent crude $87 a barrel, NYMEX crude $82 a barrel. Some news on the housing front this morning. U.S. mortgage rates, well, they increased to the highest level in 5 months. Mortgage Bankers Association data, it shows that the contract rate, 30-year fixed mortgage, increased last week to 7.24%. Now, that pushed down home purchase applications for the 5th time in the last 6 weeks. Today, we'll get a report on manufacturing that comes out at 8:30 Wall Street time, but earnings have really been in the spotlight. Let's get to Biogen right now. They're up 1%. Reported first quarter profit beat expectation. The company cut costs, and its new Alzheimer's drug, well, that's starting to gain some momentum. And then insurer Humana up 3%, pulled 2025 guidance, pressure rises on its Medicare business. We're also waiting results from Boeing, Hasbro before the bell later this afternoon, Meta, IBM, and Ford. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Now a 3-hour conversation with Dan Ives of Wedbush. I don't know, where's he been?
I have no idea where
he's so
guy is.
large now that we can't even get him on the show. Dan, let's talk Tesla first. I know you're going to give me the positive spin. Liam Denning writes a beautiful column. Musk tells Tesla dream, but don't ask for the details. What's the timeline across April, May, June to where Musk has to seep out the successful initiation of the so-called plan?
Look, I think last night was a big start because the sub 30K vehicle, I'll call it a model 2.5, it's going to be accelerated. I mean, this will probably come first half 2025, and more details clearly have to come out, but this is no new factory line. I think this is a huge start for what the bulls needed to hear on the Tesla story, especially given the dark days and what was really a train wreck 1Q.
I mean, Paul, to jump in here, because, Dan and I don't agree on this. I mean, he's a good friend, but, I'm with Liam Denning. I'm like, are you kidding me? That was a conference? Was that a conference call, Dan Ives?
Relative to the last few calls, which we talked about, right? I mean, it was a disaster. Last night, you actually had a vision. The growth strategy was laid out, talked about the lower cost vehicle, and the fears were they were going to go straight to robo-taxis and autonomous. That was a big overhang in the stock. And then you look at the margin, the cost cuts. I finally feel like there's a blueprint,
Paul,
after a few quarters.
Paul, help me here. I'm on 6th Avenue. I'm trying to get up to Central Park South.
Sure, who is
to
it?
go left or right. It's a roulette. What's the robo-taxi do when all the cars are turning right on 58th Street? Explain what a robo-taxi does.
Well, they're going to do.
It's 6th Avenue and 58th Street.
It's going to employ artificial intelligence. AI is what's going to happen there for you.
AI.
Hey, Dan, so I guess I got off that call yesterday. I was walking on the boardwalk down the shore. I actually dialed into the call to listen, and I got off the call saying, I either believe Elon and I buy the stock, or I don't and I sell the stock. Is that where we are now with the stock, do you think?
Definitely. Look, I think it's the knives have been sharpened. So bulls and bears, you make the bet here.
Yeah.
And I heard from many bears, obviously over the last, called 6 to 8 hours, they'll have their stuff. But I think for the bulls, they finally have something to hang their hat on. And again, betting against Musk for the last 4 or 5 years, it's like betting against the Knicks in this series.
He has done this before, there's no question. Okay, I'm Tesla'd out. Dan Ives on Microsoft. That's going to be a different call, a different earnings report, isn't it?
Oh, look, this is the tactician. I mean, you have the Hall of Famer Nadella. The AI revolution, it's here. And I think the monetization that we're starting to see at Microsoft, we see it, across, I think, the software layer. This is the call the whole street's going to be watching, because it shows where the monetization of AI is as the baton gets handed from NVIDIA to Microsoft.
So, Dan, that's kind of where I think A lot of investors would like to see this Microsoft story go. It's up 8% year to date. It is not getting fully priced in as an AI story, it seems like, relative to some other names like NVIDIA. What do you think Microsoft needs to say on their call tomorrow to maybe kind of get that story across a little bit more?
Look, I think it's really numbers. It's showing Copilot in terms of what deployments look. It's looking at the monetization. Of course, Azure, the cloud number is the big focus as that actually continues to be something that's probably the best barometer in terms of what the Microsoft story is doing. Look, they have massive tailwinds. And I think the broader story we're going to see across tech earnings season is the AI revolution's here. The baton's been handed from semis to software, names like ServiceNow, Salesforce, Oracle, among others.
And Dan, on Microsoft, I go back, I just take everything from pre-pandemic. Basically, Microsoft modeled out 2024, has done a double in revenue since 2019. Is that an extrapolative function? Can you take a double in revenue over 5-6 years and take that out into the Dan Ives 2030?
Well, and Tom, I take it one even step better. It's really about the AI and the cloud component, because 55% of revenue is cloud from Microsoft today. Next 3 to 4 years, it's going to be 70, 75%. So that multiple is going to continue to expand because of that higher margin business. That's why I believe it's, there's a $4 trillion market cap in a year.
Dan, the rep on you is you're an Uber bull. What is your least favorite tech company? Which one has the Ivesian radar up?
Look, I'd say least favorite. It's some of the legacy names. Like if I look at like a Cisco as a share donor, I think some of those are the ones that are really going to struggle if they don't get aggressive. But even look at Cisco, they buy Splunk, right? I mean, the point is, this is going to be really an arms race that's going to have. But Tom, like we've talked about, I think tech, this is just second, third inning of this tech bull market.
And Dan, I guess one of the questions for a lot of folks who follow tech is just kind of this AI, trying to size out AI and how much of the AI CapEx, how much of the AI investment over the next 5+ years is incremental, or is it just taking from other parts of the tech stack? How do you model that out?
I think about 60, 70% of it is incremental, because the difference is that it's revenue generating. I mean, if you look at the use cases, they're revenue generating. This is not just spending on infrastructure. And I think that's what's happening really across verticals. And we're starting to see it now. I mean, you look at Palantir, it's a good example where the use cases are exploding. And the CapEx is just massive, not just from big tech, but I think what we're seeing across the board.
I mean, Dan's like got the sweatshirt thing going. For those of you not on YouTube, I mean, it's a stunning. Pink, do you do 5 or 10 miles this morning? Are you going to go out for pre-morning jog, Dan?
I think I'll do a little Peloton and to get the heart rate up.
Yeah, it's good.
That's what I do.
I take Tang Zero for the heart rate. Dan Ives, thank you so much with Wedbush. Hugely popular, informative. Even the Bears are listening to what he's talking about here. Let's remind ourselves, Microsoft, this is post-Ballmer, 10 years, 28% per year.
Just extraordinary.
Why are we worrying about this cash flow or that cash flow? I'm looking at 28% per year on Microsoft.
Yeah, and going forward, I was just looking at the FA function time over the next 5 years. Kind of a mid-teens revenue growth is kind of what the street has.
Exactly.
I think Satya Nadella, while he's acclaimed as a great CEO, I think he's underrated for me.
He's great on this. Scott, I agree with that totally. Who's great on this is Scott Galloway down at NYU. He's out with a new book. We're trying to get Mr. Galloway on. We'll get him on here as we can. And he just said the best thing he ever did was he was so dumb he didn't know he was supposed to sell them. I don't know what he's got, but he just said, I just held on to him.
Yeah. So
and it is, 28% per year.
Extraordinary. And again, as Dan Ives was saying, this the cloud and AI, it's a big story for that.
Bloomberg Surveillance, short term for us is a 5-year hold.
Yeah.
It's like, Will Danoff.
Or long term.
Sebastian Page. We're holding out 5 years is short term. Right. Day trading with Lisa, that's what we'll cover next from New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Futures are mixed as traders chase mostly positive earnings reports yesterday. More earnings on tap for today. We have 40 companies in the S&P 500 reporting. Let's get to those futures. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%, S&P futures up 0.2%, but Dow futures, they are little change. To the bond market, the 2-year yield at 4.94%, that's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.64%, and that's up 3 basis points. To earnings we go. We'll start with Texas Instruments. They're up 6% right now. Delivered a bullish revenue forecast for the current quarter, but that was a good sign for the chip industry. And then we have Visa. They're up 2%. Reported quarterly profit that beat expectations. More Americans are swiping their cards. And finally, some news surrounding Amazon's $4 billion investment into AI firm Anthropic. Now it's facing the prospect of an in-depth UK antitrust probe over whether that collaboration threatens competition in the UK. We have Amazon is up 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Again, I get the VIX in under 16, 15.80. A healing tape, I would say, all in all. Pulse watch of Brent crude, $88 a barrel. Not to be confused with Principal Global, there is Principal Asset Management. Their shingle is out in Seattle where they get a decent cup of coffee. They're very techy. They never wear ties. When was the last time, Todd, when was the last time you wore ties?
I'm a tie aficionado, but at the same time, it's been a little bit.
It's been a little bit. Nixon was president, right? Todd Jablonski joins us right now, and the reason he's here is everybody puts out marketing garbage. And unfortunately, Jablonski's is so damn smart. You go, I got to actually read this. You have a spectacular 60-40 chart in one of your recent notes. It's the crutch of everybody, a part of a carefully balanced portfolio, 60% equities. What's wrong with a 60-40 mix right now?
Well, the 60-40 is an easy punching bag. I do find a lot of investors like to pick on the 60-40, sometimes with justification and sometimes without. I think today, though, it is a fair criticism.
Your chart's pretty compelling. Just shut up and do it.
Look, the 60-40, again, people like to take shots. It's a durable investment strategy. Sure, it had a difficult year a couple of years ago, and people piled on. Since then, it's exceeded risk-adjusted expectations, and I think it's one of the most durable, reliable investment
strategies. Can it out
a
sharp ratio on any other fancy strategy?
Sure. I mean, just look at risk parity. It's had a heck of a
So
time.
I just had to throw these to see.
I know. It's good.
We're going to do Jensen and Trainer in the next hour, Paul.
So, Todd, I mean, I guess let's just start at the very top here. The equity markets have rallied pretty well, very well off these October levels here. We're right in the middle of earnings season. Do I need earnings to really rise significantly to support this market, or what's the next impetus for this market?
I think the earnings are going to help. I think they're going to help sustain the valuations, which are certainly a key component of today. But I think today is a lot of a macro picture. I'd say macro forces are really driving the outlook. Look, going into the year, everyone expected 6 rate cuts. It was a done deal, 6 cuts. Now we might just get 2.
Yeah.
Might just get 2. And if that happens, I think that's part of the reason why investors are so focused on the Fed, so focused on financial conditions. First, it was the AI spending boom. Then we've seen a couple other narrative shifts since. I think, quite frankly, from a top-down picture, we're in an environment where you can see companies thrive, equities outperform, and particularly in the U.S., and I think that that's an environment where putting risk on in a multi-asset portfolio can make sense.
All right, so if you're putting risk on, are you putting risk on in the likes of the Teslas, the Amazons, the names, I don't know, the Magnificent, whatever they are, or do you try to go out and find value in other places, financials, healthcare, other places?
You know, for a long time in our multi-asset strategies, I've been overweight growth in the large side, and I've been overweight value in the mids and smalls. Okay. That's like a strategic holding, and that's worked remarkably well. Even on top of that, tactically, we're overweight the top of the market. I think the rise of these multi-trillion-dollar corporations is stunning. When I started in this business several decades
ago... He sounds like he lives in Seattle.
It's transformed the city. It has transformed my city.
Okay, I'm going to stop the interview right now. I'm reading Satya Nadella's autobiography with its huge family struggles, and there's way too much cricket in the book. I mean, Seattle needs a cricket team. Explain the new Microsoft post-Balmer in your Seattle. Explain the impact of Microsoft to that city.
I would say about half of the spouses of my coworkers in Seattle are employees at Microsoft, and I am stunned at the different array of businesses that firm can get into. The cloud computing move, I think, was a brilliant strategic design, and I've been really impressed in everything from that to cloud computing. Like, when it comes to these tech giants, I think that the resourcing advantage they have in competition is enormous. That leads to the big getting bigger, and I think that we can continue to see this trend grow. That's part of the reason I'm overweight large cap stocks in the U.S., and I can see these giants continue to become much larger.
Their free cash flow development, and we have Anurag, Rana, and Mandeep Singh here coming up, which is basically 2 rock stars walking in the audience, and their basic thing is the free cash flow persistency and the margin resiliency up the income statement is something. It's new and beholden. How far out is your terminal value on that? Do you look out 10 years? Do you look out to when the Kraken make the playoffs? I mean, how far out do you look?
What's a Kraken?
As a multi-asset
It's a
investor,
hockey team in Seattle.
Oh, God.
yeah, it's one of the few non-plural names out there, along with the Avalanche. But what I note is really, when you think about, again, where you're going to go with those tech investments, I do think that it has changed the game. Small cap market is about half the size of what it was 20 years ago, because the top of the market has gotten so big, it's pulled the market up. So I do expect that profitability and the sloughing off of cash flow, those cash flow generating businesses we all say are valuable, it turns out to be true. Because it gives you the opportunity to reinvest those cash flow generation into more profitable ventures, new opportunities that other
The average
competitors can't
house
do.
in Seattle is $879,000.
That seems high.
Yeah, you think so
Seattle.
for the West?
Yeah.
There's no
it's like,
sun.
It's like Beverly Hills.
You know, you Google map the address. I mean, Todd's at 601 Union Street in Seattle. You Google that, and it gives you this nice, beautiful, clear sky picture of the building. That's not how it is out there. Talk to us about the economy out there in Seattle. What's happening in Seattle?
You know, I've noticed a good local recovery, I would say. Now, the downtown urban core in Seattle has struggled a bit from its recovery. You need only look at the real estate values to look at that.
I mean, Nick Booth out at Stanford's doing all the heavy lifting on this. Work from home from where you see it.
Yep.
Are we going to get more people back into the Seattle office?
Oh, I expect so. We're there regularly, 4 to 5 days
Regularly,
a week.
what?
Yeah, I
Once
was
a
gonna say,
day?
what's
You're like
regularly?
Lisa Mateo, you're in once a week?
I'm in 4 days a week. A lot of us
Wow.
are in 5. And I love it. I'm an office enthusiast. If your corporation is willing to give
Okay,
you...
stop the show. Explain right now to the young Turks, they want to be you.
Yeah.
They want to be a CFA. They want to be Global Wall Street.
Yeah.
Tell a 28-year-old right now why they need to be in the office 5 days a week.
Your employer is more than willing. In fact, the employer is excited to give you a clean, comfortable, quiet place to get work done with often, again, food, beverage, some light entertainment, things that make employment fun.
Right.
And that's free of charge to you. And I would say if you
Right.
can take advantage of that, you'll not only get benefit from that opportunity, you'll get exposure to what we're doing there.
People say to me, how did you do it? Ready? Saturday mornings in the office. I got more done on Saturday morning than I did the rest of the week because of what you just said, quiet.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a different quiet in an office than the quiet of a house.
Yeah,
To me,
it's different. Todd, before you leave, I see in your notes Asia markets. What do we do in Asia here? I'm not going to China.
We should spend a bit of time on this. Well, again, while I'm overweight
I'll
on
give you
the
30
It's
seconds
radio.
on it.
We got 45 seconds. Go.
emerging markets, I would recommend that investors consider an underweight of China and consider an overweight of Latin America. Between the two, I think you can look at LATAM as a good value opportunity. And until I see a growth resumption I'm confident in China, I'm staying in the Western Hemisphere.
I got like 45 seconds, really important. One of my heroes runs the Kraken. Ron Francis was God when he played. He's just a complete class act. They haven't made the playoffs yet. What's going to be the pixie dust to get the Kraken going? With all that money out there, you got to be kidding me. They can buy success.
Ron Francis was great on the Whalers, great on Pittsburgh. I think he's going to be a good GM. It's going to take, I think, a better defense before we're going to make those playoffs.
I agree with that. I would literally move to Seattle to see the Ron Francis Kraken. You never thought you'd be doing this, Paul, did you?
The Kraken, I had to Google it, is a legendary sea
had to
monster
Google
of
it?
enormous size. I didn't know what a Kraken was. How do you pick Kraken as your name if you're...
He was on a conference call last night with Elon Musk. Todd Jablonski, thank you. Don't be a stranger. Come in anytime. Here, Mr. Jablonski runs money out in Seattle. His research note for principal asset management is a must-read. Short, sharp, smart, focused. Wait, that describes Michael Barr with our news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Oh, Tom, Paul, Lisa, thank you very much. The Senate passed a $95 billion package that provides aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan and heads to President Biden's desk. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke before the vote.
We tell our allies, we will stand with you. We tell our adversaries, don't mess with us. We tell the world, we will do everything to defend democracy and our way of life.
Part of the foreign aid package gives TikTok Chinese parent company an ultimatum: sell or be banned. Swing state voters are simply not convinced that the economy is improving under President Biden. Bloomberg's Amy Morris brings us the results of the latest Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll.
The Real Clear Politics average of national polls shows Trump and Biden in a virtual tie in the popular vote. But across 7 battleground states in the Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll, Trump holds a 6-point lead. A majority of poll respondents see the economy worsening by the end of the year. And despite a resilient job market, only 23% said the employment rate would improve by year's end. More than 3/4 of poll respondents say the president is responsible for the current performance of the economy. The Biden campaign is counting on social issues, especially abortion, to help energize Democrats. And for the first time in the tracking poll, more than half of swing state voters say abortion is very important to their vote. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
The criminal trial of former President Donald Trump stands in recess today, but a decision on the gag order violation could still come at any time. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Thanks so much, Michael Barr. I greatly appreciate that. Spoiler alert, I have not seen the end of Shogun. We're going to do this later this morning.
Wow.
But these shows, when they're successful, the pressure to redo it. I mean, you knew in the old days, Gunsmoke ended in May,
Yep.
and you knew, the second week of September,
Yeah.
Arness would show up again to save the day with
Right,
Rowdy Yates,
exactly.
Rawhide, and all that. But what a pressure to go out and spend, $100 million to do season 2?
Yeah,
Or
it's just-
season 3?
Yeah, some of these shows. I mean,
Three Body Problem just ended?
I know you're all over this stuff. I mean, I don't know how you have the time for all that.
I don't.
But the cost associated with some of this programming is just extraordinary. And some of these media companies, they've had to come back and say in the last year, all right, we're going to reduce our investment in programming because we got to get the profitability.
Are
in
they,
the streaming
or is it
business.
just talk? That to me is the key
I think they
question.
are. I mean, the total number of scripted hours is in fact down. The number of shows is down. It peaked at like 450 shows were originally scripted 2 years ago. We're down to about 400 now. And again, pre-streaming it was like 200.
Is the amount we spend per month increasing?
I haven't seen the data on that. I would say it's certainly no lower. I mean, you ask anybody. I mean, Lisa Mateo is probably paying
Well,
4 or 5
Lisa has so many
streaming
services. She has so many services. When she turns on the TV, Staten Island, it dims.
It dims, exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
You gotta cut back. It's too much. It's too much.
Exactly. So it used to be just one bill we pay to Comcast or Charter, whoever it was, and that was it. Now you got to really take a look at your credit card bill and say, all right, what am I paying for? What are some of the offspring paying for on my credit card?
I wonder if you shut it off, if they'll even notice.
Okay, ready for this? We just did Microsoft earnings tomorrow. Meta this afternoon with Tim and Carol. Tim Stevanovic came up to me and he said,
No, we had it
You
yesterday.
don't have it right.
Stenovic, we had it.
Okay, it's a Rochester thing. What do you want? We have Zweigel's hot dogs. Okay, I'm sorry. But Tim, he just called me Tim. I'm like, okay.
Just call him
Tim and Carol have met this afternoon. Microsoft yesterday, 28% 10-year annual return. Guess Disney, Paul. 10-year return.
10%.
I would have said 10, 9, 11, hike. 5.4% per year. It's like Ford Motor results out of Mickey. That's Mickey Mouse. From Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got green on the screen. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. S&P futures up 0.2%. Dow futures, they are little changed. The 2-year yield at 4.94%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.63%, and that's up 3 basis points. To commodities, spot gold lower at $2,316 an ounce. We have Brent crude $88 a barrel. NYMEX crude $83 a barrel. So more earnings, more pressure for Boeing. They're up 3%. This is coming after a sharp sell-off in the stock this year. The company said it burned through $3.93 billion in cash in the first quarter. And Swedish car maker Volvo, they're down 8%. It missed first quarter earnings estimates. And finally, Kering, ADR is down 8%, warning that profits going to plunge on slowing sales at Gucci, its biggest brand. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Paul Sweeney, that was great with Todd Jablonski.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about Seattle and it's boom and bust. I mean, I get that. They've had some tough times, but you just
as long as Microsoft's there, they're in good shape. I'm still upset that Boeing left Seattle because I think about global aerospace and American aerospace. I think Seattle and Boeing. So
my father had a peripheral relationship with them on the defense side, and he was thunderstruck the day they moved out of Seattle.
Yeah, it was just it was just the C-suite. All the engineering stuff remains in Seattle.
Doesn't matter.
It wasn't a good image in my mind.
The best part. I'll say this because Mike's listening. Mike, he comes in like at 9:05.
Yeah, why?
9:15,
Why not?
But, you see Mr. Bloomberg every day.
Yep, every day coming in.
Do you notice in the food court? He goes for the Cheez-Its.
That's what I hear.
Everything else is gluten-free.
Yep.
It's like the Mateo food court, and Mike's just going for the Cheez-Its. But, we see the brass here every day, which keeps us in line somewhat, I guess. Maybe Lisa will say this.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
On Apple CarPlay, on YouTube, it is the front pages. Brought to you by Interactive Brokers, their bond marketplace. Access their vast selection of over 1 million global fixed income securities with no markups, no built-in spreads, and low transparent commissions. Learn more at ibkr.com/bonds. My people said Lisa was wound up today. Oh, Lisa, how do you start?
Fired up. Okay, so walking around New York City streets, what do you see everywhere? Scaffolding. Yep. It's everywhere.
Don't get me going.
See, this is it. It's a hot button issue, okay? Did you know there are more than 8,500 scaffoldings around the city streets? If you were to stretch them out, it would go from Manhattan to Montreal. That's how much we have. That's what they're saying, okay? This is the New York Times. Now, they're supposed to be temporary, right? But here's the problem. There's nearly 1,000 that have been in place for more than 3 years.
Yeah.
So they're sticking around. There's a lot of regulations around it. City officials want to do something about it. They want to change it.
Fix it.
Yeah.
The whole place, there's parts of Midtown, folks, it's like Place Vendôme in Paris without the charm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like miles of scaffolding.
And I think you just got to go around and just take it down. I mean,
Lisa, what are they going to do? In your reporting, what are they going to do?
So they're going through. They want to put all these reforms down. So they want to reduce how many there can be, how long they can be up. They want to increase the fines. That's what they think they're going to do. So they can strengthen the enforcement of it. So they think that if they increase these fines, hit hard on enforcement, it's going to take some of these down.
I mean, I don't know. To me,
this seems like an easy one. If I were a politician, this would be an easy win for me to go out and get.
You have to have them up for safety.
Yeah.
I get that.
Of course. When there's
agrees.
construction.
I've had a friend in, I get it. But if it's been up for 3 years and nothing's going on, take it down Tuesday.
Yep, exactly.
That's the problem.
All right, what else we got?
All right, airlines. This is a good one for travelers.
Yes.
They now have to pay automatic refunds for things like canceled flights. This is new from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Came out today. So they have to provide these automatic refunds. This is to from within the U.S. if their flights are canceled or even if they're altered, significantly altered. There are certain restrictions for that too.
Yep.
But the goal is just to make it easier to get people to get their money back. to make those refund policies more consistent from one airline to the next because it differs as you go from airline to airline. Travelers will also get refunds for checked bag fees if the bag is lost, and also if it's not delivered within 12 hours of domestic flights. So there's another bonus there. And you're going to get it right away. It's an automatic refund. So however you paid, whether credit card or even cash, then that's how you
So I don't have to stand in line with like 5,000 other people to get customer service in Newark for United.
So it's gonna be
Usually I just eat it. I'm like, all right, my flight's canceled. I'm going home.
But now you don't have to.
Okay, very good.
You don't have
That's
to
good
eat
news.
it. You can get your money back.
Can we do an audible here?
Yes.
Did I hear yesterday Terminal A at Newark won some award?
Yes.
Yeah, Michael Barr had that news story. We won some award, or they won some award for like greatest terminal. Now it's
nice.
awesome. It is
Yeah,
great. And the
it's
best
really
thing
nice.
about the new Terminal A is when you get off your flight and you need to get your Uber, it's a very organized, easy way to access
Right.
you. Unlike Terminal C, which is
You would
a
have to
free-for-all, and you
would
put
have to
your
take
life
a
at risk.
tram sometimes.
Yep.
In some, it
Yep.
was a little.
So anyway, they did a good job. Terminal B is now undergoing the similar type of construction and renovation. So
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
We're getting there.
Little
After
by little.
years, we're just, the negativity about this, we're getting there. If they just fix the potholes on 58th Street. Next.
That's going to take an eternity. American Airlines. Do either of you have the advantage, the loyalty points for American Airlines?
I'm not an American guy. I'm not a DFW person.
Well, they're changing how flyers can earn rewards again because they've done it before. A lot of airlines are changing it. Here's the difference. Okay, so starting in July, travelers will only receive loyalty points, advantage miles for airfare if they book directly with American or one of its partners or a preferred travel agency. That's the only way we can do it. The co-branded credit cards, that's not going to be affected. That can get you your miles. But it just shows how they're continuing to change, to try and get in some new customers, get new people hooked on American.
Paul, don't you think from a securities analysis standpoint, it's just a tough business?
It really is. I mean, I think, and I'm so surprised that you see these folks and they make money in one business and they say, "Oh, I'm going to go start an airline." Like why would you want to get into?
American Airlines 10-year track record. Microsoft 28% per year. Disney tanking 5% per year. American Airlines -7% per year.
Yeah.
Again, off the pandemic. It's
a
tough
tough margin. I mean, it's a low margin business, and you got fuel costs you have to deal with.
You got people like Lisa arguing with you.
Yeah, exactly.
But people
you got
are
unions
serious about their points.
The last time I did a la-di-da flight, I had to stand in the lounge going out, and I had to stand in the lounge coming back. That's how messed up it is.
The lounge is packed. Okay.
The lounge is literally there were no seats.
See, I don't get in the lounge. Where am I missing out?
Well, you can use your points to get into the lounge.
Okay.
The
What do
lounges,
you got?
you know what? The lounges are very big in Europe. That's like the thing. Everybody's in the lounge in Europe. I never go to the lounges here in the U.S.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
I can
don't get
report United opened a lovely lounge finally at De Gaulle, CDG.
Okay.
They opened a lovely lounge.
Did you have a seat there?
I had a seat.
There you go.
It was very, very
Of course he did.
Next.
When you get triple, first class, you get a
Then
seat.
you get a seat. You
Next.
definitely get a seat. Tom, I saw this one. I thought of you right away. Will there be a Shogun season 2?
Oh.
This is the question. Business Insider. Okay, so it's streamed on Hulu. Is that how you watch it, on Hulu?
Yeah, I think
Okay,
so.
you think
I'm
so.
in charge of that. Yeah.
So here's the thing. The creators are telling The Hollywood Reporter the show was made so long ago because of lengthy production. It took a long time. It was like a 5-year journey just to make that first season. So if they were to be shooting a second season, they would already have to be shooting already. But they're saying since it took so long, they already got that pre-production work out of the bag. So now it'll be a little bit faster if they were to do a season 2.
Well, I don't know. I'm looking here at the
viewers
story.
want it. They're asking
Yeah.
for it. The Shogun, it was a self-contained novel, but
Yes, okay.
there were a series of novels too.
Maybe.
So it could kind of branch
Mr.
off.
Clavel gave them their sequel. He wrote
Yes.
4 or 5 books, and Taipan is after Shogun, and it's 19th century, 1840, 1850 Hong Kong. And you could even have
would be
some
a
of the
great
same
time.
characters doing, Anna could show up again anytime. But Clavel gave them the sequel to the Pacific Rim, in this case Hong Kong, from Japan. But it'll be interesting to see.
Would
I
you
haven't
watch
seen the
season
last
2?
episode.
You haven't seen the last?
No, I haven't seen the last one. I'm waiting for Mrs. Keene to arrive. I'll see it. Actually, I've read the book twice, so I think
Oh,
yeah,
you know.
If you haven't read the book, I highly recommend, for those that have seen Shogun, it is a rewarding 1,200 pages. It is what Clavel did And I should point out also King Rat of the Singapore, where the Singapore airport is, they bulldozed the prisoner of war camp from World War II.
I didn't know that.
And King Rat is his shortest and his best book. It is, I can't say enough about the intensity. I read it when I was like 15, and I was ruined for it. Lisa Mateo, thank you so much. For the newspapers, red and green on the screen, futures up 12, the VIX under 16, 15.76. Earnings, Tim, Carol, tonight, Meta. That's all you need to know. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Apple's still minting more money than God, right?
Geopolitics front and center for global Wall Street.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, in the middle of tech earnings season. Meta this afternoon, Boeing this morning, Ford this morning as well. Of course, we're picking up the pieces from Tesla. Ed Ludlow out with a blistering note this morning on Twitter. He's just arriving. He's just getting up right now. He had a long day yesterday.
Yeah, we had to charge the Tesla.
Ed put in like a 10-hour day yesterday. Let's get right to it. We got huge news flow this morning. Bloomberg Surveillance were brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Let Cohn Resnick's enterprise risk advisors help you build confidence in your supply chain using data analytics. Visit CohnResnick.com. Here's a tug of war out there. Paul's lived this. I've lived this, not as directly as Paul. This is Carl Keatoney over at the Death Star. Sanford Bernstein. I still call it Sanford Bernstein.
I do too.
I'm sorry. It will always be.
Black Book.
Bernstein, quote, Tesla stated that it expects to grow units in fiscal year. We do not believe is a slam dunk. We struggle with why Tesla needs a discrete robotaxi. We believe widespread deployment of the new car, whatever, is 5 to 10 years away.
Wow.
Reiterate, underperform 120 target. At the same time, there's people modeling high 2s, 300s.
Yep, absolutely. There's a big divergence.
Explain the divergence.
I
when
think
you're a securities analyst.
I think, Tom, I've seen it since the beginning of Tesla as a public company. The technology analysts and the technology-oriented investors, they buy off on Elon Musk and the vision as a technology. That's great. That's worked for them. They've been absolutely right over the last 7, 8 years. The other half are kind of auto analysts, auto investors, industrial investors, and they just don't see it. They just don't see the valuation for what this company ultimately will be. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Stay with us. Our Global Wall Street economics discussion of the day. Steve Risciuto with us on Apple CarPlay, on YouTube as well. Search Bloomberg Podcast. Look for Lisa Mateo and 3 backup singers. That's the chiclet to hit there. As well, with our Bloomberg Business Flash, the star, Lisa Mateo.
Thank you very much. We have futures in the green. This is as Wall Street shifts that attention to earnings. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. S&P futures 0.2%. Dow futures, they are little change right now, but the NASDAQ leading the charge. A big part of that, Tesla, their shares up 12%. The company announced a big shortfall in its first quarter earnings, sales margins, but it also said it's moving up the production of less expensive EVs to this year, and investors really like the sound of that. We have more earnings coming out this morning. We have AT&T. They're up about 3%. Topped estimates for profit in the first quarter, added more wireless phone customers than expected. You have Hilton. They're up 4%. Earnings beat forecast. Growth in international travel. Well, that helped make up for that slowing demand over in the U.S. And all eyes will be focused after the bell. Meta opens its books. It's up 2%. We also have IBM, tomorrow, Microsoft, and Alphabet. Want to hit the bond market quickly. 2-year yield at 4.93%. That's little change. And the 10-year yield at 4.64%. That's up 3 basis points. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Right to it. Stephen Risciuto is with Mizuho. Brilliant work on the American economy. Stephen, if you look at the algebraic function of our GDP out Thursday, which is the most interesting item? Which partial derivative, consumption, investment, government, the export dynamic, which one's the most interesting study with this GDP report?
I think the reality is the inventory and trade components are going to be the most interesting components, because whether or not we know the consumer demand was there, the question is, how was it satisfied? Certainly wasn't satisfied through domestic production, because a lot of companies were sitting there assuming that the economy was going to roll over, and therefore they weren't ramping up production. So how much of it came out of inventory, how much of it came out of fast delivery trade are really going to be important components to tell us where we go heading into the later half of the year.
So, Steve, just broadly speaking, stepping back, it seems like this economy is in pretty solid condition here. I know we had some PMIs that were a little bit weaker a day or so ago. What's your GDP call for this U.S. economy for the remainder of this year? Maybe even think about next year.
Well, we're into the environment where we think we're coming down from 3.1% Q4 over Q4 last year into the level of around 2.3 to 2.5%. That's still solidly above trend, and I think that is likely to be where we continue to go from here. You know, monetary policy is really not as restrictive as people tend to think it is, principally because they're believing that the period post-financial crisis to COVID is the new normal. The new normal was the anomalous period. And a return to normality means that the neutral level of the nominal Fed funds rate is probably closer to 4% than the 2.5, 3 numbers that are out there in the market.
So what will the Fed do? I don't mean so much, monetary policy, the parlor game, as I call it, Steve Risciuto. But if they get a Risciuto number and you overlay on inflation, you're talking about a nominal spirit, to say the least. How will the Fed adapt to that?
Well, all they'll do is continue to do what they've been doing, pushing out the timing of their cuts.
Paul, I can't say enough about this. When in doubt, do nothing is a fundamental of Steve Risciuto's world.
Hey, Steve, the PCE deflator, smart folks like yourself tell us lay people, that we need to focus on that because that's what the Fed focuses on. What do you think we're going to see with that PCE deflator on Friday, and how do you think the Fed's going to interpret that?
Well, I think the PCE numbers on Friday are going to tell the Fed what they've already know, which is basically that inflation is getting stuck closer to 3% than getting stuck closer to 2%. Our Q4 over Q4 number, our year-over-year number for the fourth quarter of this year is 2.9% for the PCE number at the headline level, which is basically very close to the 3% number and still a whole percentage point off their target. They've created a labor market environment that's tight. There is global deflation holding down good prices, but there is more service price inflation in the system, and it's that service price inflation that's proving to be much more sticky for the Fed to get down, and therefore this is one of the reasons why I still believe that eventually this market, which has been going through a lateral upward shift in the yield curve between 2s and 10s, keeping that curve inverted, will eventually steepen from the long end rather than steepening from the front end, as most investors have been waiting for this year.
Steve Risciuto, walk us through how China exports deflation into the U.S. GDP equation, or is it overstated?
I think it's broader than that. It's also a general foreign competition equation. You look at where the dollar is, given the relative interest rate differentials that are still driving the currency market rather than the relative inflation story. And that relative interest rate story has pushed us up back to around the 105 level, the 106 area on DXY, which means we're being allowed to have more and more foreign competition from all sorts of countries, not just China, that are weighing down on domestic goods producers' ability to pass through increased costs to the consumer.
Steve, talk to us about that consumer, the U.S. consumer here. How is he or she doing right now? I mean, it seems like they have a job, wages are going higher, inflation's coming down. How is the consumer?
Well, in addition to having a job, in addition to wages doing well, they also paid down a lot of debt, and they're comfortable increasing that level of debt because they're comfortable in their job position, and they're also comfortable in their lower debt levels. So the reality is the consumer is willing to spend more money, and it is powering the economy. Then you throw on top of it all the added fiscal stimulus that this administration has provided over the last few years to the economy and continues to provide through things like the student loan forgiveness programs that they continue to advance, really just keeps on driving the consumer forward.
Steve Risciuto, thank you so much. With Mizuho this morning, greatly appreciate it there in the equation. Y equals C plus I plus G plus NX.
It sounds like algebra.
On the back end, you've got the trade dynamic. Sometimes the trade dynamic can really fit in, but I don't see that so much here coming up. What it is this great missed call. And again, Russia Sharma in the FT with a brilliant essay from Rockefeller this weekend just about the thing we got wrong, which was all these multiple stimuli and how they folded into our lives. I mean, the stimulus was enough to make the Detroit Tigers
and you look at
win more than occasionally.
You look at the U.S. economy versus other parts of the world. I don't know. It's exceptionalism, I guess, is the term people are using for the U.S. economy.
It's exceptionalism. It's like when you have some Domino pizza. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
That sounds good. Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The Senate passed a long-delayed $95 billion emergency aid package for Ukraine and other besieged U.S. allies, clearing the way for resumed arms shipments to Kyiv. Republican Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell called it an extremely important day in the history of the free world.
Our enemies have tested whether the arsenal of democracy is, in fact, built to endure. Well, tonight, the Senate will send a clear message.
President Joe Biden is expected to quickly sign the assistance package. President Biden's recent polling bump in key battleground states has mostly evaporated as a deep current of pessimism about the trajectory of the U.S. economy hurts his standing with voters. That's according to the latest Bloomberg News Morning Consult poll. It found the president is ahead in just one of the 7 states most likely to determine the outcome of his matchup with Donald Trump, leading Michigan by 2 percentage points. We get more with Bloomberg's Gregory Corti.
We've seen that the president's numbers tend to move in lockstep with how people are feeling about the economy, and this is a pretty pessimistic electorate when it comes to the economy. And so we're seeing Biden falling back to that same place that he was a couple of months ago in trailing President Trump in most of these states.
Bloomberg's Gregory Corti. The Supreme Court hears a key abortion case today that puts strict state bans to the test since the Dobbs decision 2 years ago. The question is whether federal law requiring emergency rooms to offer stabilizing treatment preempts state laws banning abortion. The case comes from Idaho, where the law allows abortion only to save the life but not the health of the mother. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Let's jump out front on the Facebook. I'm sorry, it's not Meta, it's Facebook. Isn't Meta dead? Didn't they? I
haven't heard
They
much
did
about
Meta,
it.
but Meta sort of like walked away, right?
You just don't hear much about it anymore, which is a good thing, I think, for the stock and for investors' perspective.
What's the symbol now? I don't even know.
It is Meta. I mean, they changed.
Oh, it's Meta. They changed the symbol.
Yeah, we had FB
God, learning every day.
Took this thing public, but stock's up 40% year to date. It's up over 130% over the past 12 months. $1.3 trillion in market cap, so it's done better than good, and it's been not a typical internet story, Tom, where it's been the top line growth everybody focuses on. This has really been a story that's been driven by cost cutting. And, it's 2023 was a year of cost cuts, and boy, did they deliver, and the stock reacted. So Mr. Zuckerberg, he
the
delivered.
people that got this right, I mean, you got a linear trend going back to the advent. Take it back 10 years, 23% per year. But there was the crater from 21, the pandemic, into the bottom of 22. And I think of Paul Kudrowski, Brian Weiser, and others. Will Danoff, I think it's his lead holding with Contrafund. They just got on board the concept, and it's right back. It's one of the few things that's back to its linear trend pre-pandemic.
Yeah, and again, I think they've really focused on kind of what investors want them to focus on, which is to drive top line, cut costs on some of the non-core businesses. You can still invest in the moonshots, but do we have to invest so much?
Yeah.
So let's cut back, be a little more reasonable, drive margins. And man, the stock has reacted positively.
Well, we'd like to get Mark
them.
Zuckerberg on. I don't know if we could.
Yeah,
do
Contrafund owns 41.3 million shares, Tom. There
it's
you
up
go.
358% off the pandemic gloom. Wow.
Yep.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. NASDAQ futures up 0.6%. S&P futures up 0.2%. We have Dow futures. They are little changed. The 2-year yield at 4.94%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.64%, up 4 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold lower at $2,313 an ounce. Brent crude, $88 a barrel. Some news on the housing front. U.S. mortgage rates increased the highest level in 5 months. The MBA shows that the contract rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage increased last week to 7.24%. Today, we'll get a report on manufacturing that comes out in about 15 minutes from now. But it's earnings in the spotlight. It's Boeing up 3%. First quarter revenue beat estimates, but the company said it burned through $3.93 billion in cash in the period. And then you have Biogen. Biogen's up 6%, reported first quarter profit, beat expectations. The company cut costs and its new Alzheimer's drug, well, that's starting to gain some momentum. And finally, Humana up 1%, pulled its 2025 guidance. Pressure rises in its Medicare business. Management said it needs, quote, greater clarity. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Spirited discussion out on YouTube live chat. They want more Twitter from Michael Barr.
Do they?
They need more presence from
Boy.
Barr. If it isn't the
To sign him
Tigers,
up.
he doesn't tweet. We gotta work up the Barr game on social media. This is something we've been following. Thank you so much, particularly Damian Sassauer for value add here, and that is yen is weakened over the last 4 or 5 years, and we've gone from a 76 level out to a very weak 155 printed moments ago on yen. That takes the yen weakness back to 1987 to show you the change agent here. I basically, for Global Wall Street, for those not keeping score at home, you're on a 24-hour watch where the BOJ will do an intervention. They will be very alone when they do that. It's not a coordinated intervention. There's a whole other thing we're not going to do on an earnings Wednesday, unsterilized or sterilized. But the answer is just moments ago, printing a $155 yen is a big deal for those that care at home. One of the big deals for us is to know that the Washington food court is the best food court in Bloomberg. We need to keep our senators, our members of the White House properly defined. And what's amazing here is like Lisa's going completely granola, like yogurt and berries. Laura Davidson, I mean, she's like a value add. She's going to oatmeal.
Yeah.
Piling on.
They got it all down there.
They got it all down there. Laura Davidson from the food court in Washington, D.C. Laura, what is the to-do list for the president right now? He's so much off the radar versus the Trump opera in New York and other things going on. What's the day-to-day to-do list for President Biden?
Well, you're starting to see him go to places and he can move much more freely than Trump can because, he is not in court 4 days a week like Trump is. So, earlier this week in Florida, talking about abortion. Later this week, we're actually going to have a split screen in New York when both Trump and Biden are there. Biden will be there fundraising, doing some campaign events, and Trump will be, sitting in court day in and day out. So the campaign is starting to seize on this and, kind of use those days when Trump is stuck in court and, literally can't talk to get their message out there.
An open question, an unfair question. When does Ukraine get the benefit of the bill just passed by the Senate? Do they get bullets Thursday or next Monday, or is this drawn out weeks and weeks?
So the initial shipments, the Defense Department is getting ready to send those as soon as the president signs the bill, so they can get those there. It's looking like a matter of days. But it won't all come in once; it'll come in multiple shipments. But they will start to feel that relief of that bill, very soon.
And Tom, I saw some on social media, Admiral Stavridis, a friend of this program, tweeting out that he believes some of those planes will be lifting off literally within hours of the signing from various points around Europe. So we'll have to see how that plays out. Laura, I know Bloomberg and Morning Consult, they have monthly polling here as it relates to the campaign. What's the most recent polling coming out of this Bloomberg News Morning Consult? What's it telling us?
So things are not looking so good for Biden. This poll looks at 7 swing states, and last month we saw an uptick for Biden. We saw an uptick in optimism about the economy, and those trends were reversed this month. Trump is leading Biden in 6 out of those 7 swing states. It's only Michigan where Biden is up. And we also saw that pessimism about the economy has also increased. People are feeling poorly about things like the inflation rate, the economy in general, borrowing costs, that they don't see those things improving by the end of the year. And that is bad news for the Biden campaign.
Are these two ever going to have a debate? What's the
That's
feeling
a really
within
good
Washington
question.
these days?
Really, really good question.
So this is something that Trump has actually started talking a lot about recently. He is agitating to debate Biden sooner rather than later. There is, the nonpartisan Presidential Debate Commission. They have several debates, 3 set up for the fall. I don't have the dates off the top of my head, but September, October, as well as a vice presidential debate.
Yeah.
It still remains to be seen, if both men will show up to those. There's been a lot of jockeying, but
Right.
this is something that, Trump, of course, famously didn't show up for any of the debates in the primaries. But almost as soon as the primaries were over, said he wanted
Right.
to debate Biden. We'll see how that one shakes out.
In your day-to-day reporting, how is the Palestine-Israeli Gaza college protests folding into the Laura Davison zeitgeist in Washington? Is Washington removed from these collegiate debates, or are they monitoring them? What's the story?
This is something that both campaigns are really honing in on, particularly as it pertains with young voters. And the college protests that we've seen over the past several days are really only fueling that fire and some of the concern that the Biden campaign has around, kind of how much this issue will stick. There was a lot of discussion back in the fall of, when October 7th happened, how much will this be playing in the public conscience, a year later plus when people go to the polls? And what we're seeing, at least right now, this is an issue that, is really continuing to resonate with voters, particularly young voters, particular voters, on the left. And so that's going to be something that Biden in particular is going to have to grapple with as he, continues throughout the summer.
So, Laura, we have a very long campaign season ahead of us here. What's the play for the Biden administration? How much out there they're going to put the president versus, just kind of staying within the White House, letting maybe Trump deal with all of his outside issues? What's the play for the administration here?
They are really ramping up their presence, both with Biden as well as surrogates, being out there in the swing states. They've opened up more than 130 offices nationwide, are really trying to get both, the principal himself as well as other key messengers, people like Harris, the First Lady, Doug Emhoff, key cabinet secretaries out to talk about both, the economic issues that Biden is really proud of, things like chips, things like infrastructure, but then also making sure they're really hitting abortion hard. The president that is an issue he is less comfortable with, so they're sending out other surrogates. Harris has been sort of the key messenger on abortion. So we saw her, last week in Arizona talking about that.
Laura, great overview. Thank you so much. Laura Davison, just really complete there on what you need to know. I had all the stories, the endless coverage in Washington, some of the nuances there inside the Beltway. Laura Davison from Washington. YouTube heating up. They're all like, where's Sassower?
Yeah.
And you know what he does? He got an annual pilgrimage where after the Masters, he doesn't go to Augusta. A sophisticate like Damien, he goes to Peachtree.
Nice.
Which is like Robert Trent Jones.
Yep.
It's got the length Damien needs. It's like 7,000 yards.
Sure.
He can't play on a traditional
big hitter,
course.
Damien.
He comes off the tee like it's like Greg Norman. It's like scary. Damien's down. He's at Peachtree, and I guess it's gorgeous. It's like not talked about. Marysville.
Yeah, I don't quite get the invite to his golf outings. You have to be a certain status, I think, to get the invite there.
You got to be like somebody who's lost. You got to lose a certain amount in derivatives before you can play golf with Damien. And we hope Damien has a great golf trip down to Georgia. He's working on that this morning. It's an odd tape. Paul, how do I have red and green in the screen, and I got the NASDAQ up 0.7%?
Yeah.
Good morning, Tesla. I guess.
Yeah, I guess. So again, a little bit of move here in the tape here. The S&P is up about 1/3%. Dow pretty much unchanged, and as you mentioned, Tom, the Nasdaq up 0.75%. Yields, I don't know, the 10-year Treasuries up about 4 basis points, 4.63% on your 10-year. I'm going to call out, because I know Matt Miller's listening. Bitcoin, it's up about 0.4%, 66,600. That's what he says when he's dropping off kids at school and in his Ferrari or Lamborghini.
Really?
Or
he's on Apple CarPlay.
He's on Apple CarPlay, so he listens in. So he'll be back at work supposedly sometime next month. So
pro tip tonight, 7 p.m. Pay attention to Bloomberg in Asia is yen. Hits a 155. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures, red and green on the screen. Traders chased mostly positive earnings report yesterday. Today, we're starting to see that continue. More earnings on tap. We have 40 companies in the S&P 500 reporting. The NASDAQ leading the charge right now. NASDAQ futures up 0.7%. S&P futures up 0.2%. The Dow is little changed. The 2-year yield at 4.94%, little change. The 10-year yield at 4.64%. That's up 3 basis points. Commodity spot gold lower at $2,315 an ounce. We have Brent crude at $88 a barrel. And over to Bitcoin. That's up about 0.5% at $66,668. To earnings we go. We have Visa up 2%. Reported quarterly profit beat expectations. More Americans are swiping their cards. And we have Texas Instruments up 6%. Delivered this bullish revenue forecast for the current quarter, which is really a good sign for the chip industry. And Hasbro up 5%. Earnings per share, gross margin in the first quarter topped estimates. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Elisa, thanks so much. On Texas Instruments, one of my books of the summer is Chip War. Chris Miller, I can't say enough about it. I just threw it at the boyfriend of one of the offspring.
Really?
Smart mouth guy. He's like Mr.
sure
Computers Tech, and he's got like 18 colleges, begging him to go there. And I just said, shut up and read this book. Chip War. Chris Miller.
How would you like to walk in?
He had thirds.
Tom Keene is like the father. How bad would that be?
We're having dinner, and he's like, "Can I have more?" It's like third helpings. I'm like, usually the dogs get the third helping. Vet Bill's looking at me like, "Who is this guy?" The economic indicators, they're out. We'll go over them in a moment. Economic indicators and the leadership of Commonwealth. Thank you, Commonwealth. Commonwealth supporting more than 2,000 independent financial advisors with the solutions they need to grow a thriving business. Commonwealth, go where you grow. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. I don't know, Paul, you take the 3-month moving average. Ed McKelvey taught me to do that. I got revisions down a little bit.
Okay.
And I got sort of an on-man durable goods. And, McKee's smarter at this than I am, but I think it's like a nothing burger.
Yep, that's good.
That's
all we need.
That's if you get a master's, you're allowed to say that.
Yep.
Nothing
exactly.
burger and all that. Well, right now, she's more than a nothing burger. She is exquisite in the analysis of the American economy. Lindsey Piegza joins us now with Stifel. Lindsey, how do you use cap goods, ex-Air, ex-Boeing non-defense? How do you use one of these obscure statistics?
Well, I wouldn't argue that it's overly obscure. When we look at capital goods orders and we exclude aircraft and defense, what we're really doing is removing that volatile transportation component. And we can see then the underlying trend for business investment. And in fact, the reason that we need to do that is because when we look at something like last month's numbers, transportation plunged nearly 20%. So we need to take out that volatility to really get a sense where business investment is going. And right now it seems to be still positive, but very minimal growth in terms of those capital, those investment dollars flowing out into the marketplace.
Elon Musk in a call last night, he says, I want to see cap goods orders, non-defense, ex-Air, ex-Tesla.
Ex-Tesla.
That's coming next.
So Lindsey, just stepping back here, what's kind of the Stifel GDP call for the remainder of this year and maybe for next year? I mean, I think a lot of folks feel like the economy may not be working for them despite some of the headline numbers.
Well, I think the economy right now is still solid. We're still seeing consumers spending. We're still seeing businesses investing. But as I mentioned, we're losing momentum. We're seeing those heightened signs of fatigue. So what does that translate into for GDP? We're looking for about a 2.5-ish% average pace for 2024. Now, of course, volatility quarter to quarter aside, Q1 may come in a little stronger, but 2 to 2.5% for the current year. The bigger question is, where do we go into 2025? Because if we continue to lose momentum, we've gone from 5% in the third quarter to, let's call it 3% at year end. If we hit that range of 2.5 this year, what if we continue to lose momentum into next year? Now we're virtually falling below the bare minimum that you would expect from a developed economy. But at this point, is the Fed still tolerating above target inflation? So that's my biggest concern, that we're slowly moving into more of a stagflation scenario.
I asked this question the other day, Lindsey, but the fact is a central bank can't get out front, whether it's ECB or Fed or the Bank of Thailand. I mean, they have to wait and go ex post, right?
I would argue the Fed is... Right now, the Fed is backing itself into the corner. The Fed should have raised rates higher. Now that they see inflation reversing course for 3 consecutive months since the start of the year, they need to re-engage, raise rates to a sufficiently restrictive level to get price pressures under control, and we can start to talk about a sustainable recovery. The longer they slow play this, the more price pressures become entrenched into the economy, and the more difficult it's going to be to ever get us back to that 2% target.
Cancel the Piegza lunch at the Eccles building. That's all I can say. Folks, what you just heard there this is classic Lindsey Piegza. What she just said is a huge deal.
So, Lindsey, just to be clear here, you think that inflation is such that the Fed's next move should be a rate increase versus a cut?
When we look at inflation, the target is 2%. The target is not 3. The target is not 3.5. So the Fed has not met their mandate of stable prices. And with momentum now turning to the upside, I think the Fed has more work to do. Now that's my preference for what the Fed should do. That's not what I necessarily expect the Fed to do. This is a Fed that desperately wants to provide relief. So I do still think that the next move is likely a rate cut, but I think that would be a material mistake on the part of the central bank.
Wow. So inflation, is your sense that this inflation that we've seen in the past 3 months, that's something that's not a blip, that's something more?
I do think it's something more. If you think about the motivation for the Fed to raise the rates, it's to increase borrowing costs, make that more onerous, slow consumption, and by extension, slow the economy and result in more benign inflation. But when we look at this consumer, there is still a good amount of spending and borrowing power out there in the economy. So clearly the Fed has not done enough to slow, let alone break the consumer to ensure a return to price stability.
What's the response of your clients, and particularly your institutional clients, Lindsey, when you say this? I mean, I'm not going to say you're an outlier call here. I think Jim Bianco's really led with the idea disinflation vectors out of tune. But these are really aggressive comments you're making. What is the response of your institutional clients to this?
Well, again, this is what I would hope the Fed would do. But when we look at our forecast, when we look at the messaging from the Fed does appear willing to tolerate above target inflation. So again, our expectation is that the Fed will offer at least one, if not two, rate cuts by the end of the year, given their desire to continue to perpetuate these solid conditions in the economy. But when we look at, I think, the longer run stability of the economy, the longer run ability for us to get back to price stability, that's where I struggle, because historically we see that the Fed does need to raise rates above the previous peak in inflation.
Well, when Kashkari's out the door and you're the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Minnesota, Lindsey Piegza, just simply, if we get a Piegza rate rise, does that push us into recession?
I don't necessarily think a recession is necessary to get price stability, but I do think that a much slower growth rate would likely be the outcome, which is not necessarily, again, something that we need to avoid at all costs. The normal fluctuations of the business cycle are very healthy, but the biggest issue is getting us back to a point where inflation is under control, and that allows everyone to enjoy and participate in the economy.
I just sent one of our interns a note, Lindsey. I want to get you on next week after PCE.
Yep.
I mean, I think these are wow comments. These are, and again, this is the prescriptive idea, Paul, the should of it, or could. And you're saying, what will they do? They're just going to hold rates here, Lindsey, until they see more data?
I do think the Fed is on an extended pause for now. But again, if inflation stabilizes at these levels, with the Fed willing to tolerate above target inflation, I think the Fed would be willing to give us 25 or 50 basis points of cuts by year end. But if we don't see further improvement in the inflation data, they would likely return to the sideline for a second round extended pause.
Lindsey, thank you. Just superb. We'll feature that on Single Best Idea today out on Apple Podcasts. Those are stunning statistics from Dr. Piegza. Two things just happened. Vet Bill just emailed me from home and said, sit up straight.
Yep, okay.
On YouTube, you can see this. Go to Bloomberg Podcast. I sort of get the morning slouch like this, I mean, Lisa's never done this in her life. Barr, on the other hand. So, Vet Bill just told me
I wanted the lights turned back down. Barr
did you see that? Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to say. Finally, we have the lights on this morning. That was wow from Lindsey Piegza. That's what this show is about. The VIX, 15.73. With our news in New York City, the lights are on. Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. TikTok may be running out of time. The proposed ban is included within a bill approved by Congress that includes aid for Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. They have a year to be sold or divested by their Chinese-based owner or face the prospect of a ban in the U.S. It would shut down access to 170 million American users and millions of small businesses. One lawmaker called it a spy balloon in your phone. As for the $95 billion foreign aid package, Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, said the assistance for foreign allies sends a clear message.
History will record that even as allies and partners may have worried about the depth of our resolve, even as Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran grew more convinced that our influence had run its course, and even as loud voices here at home insisted on abandoning the responsibilities of leadership, America stepped up and the Senate held firm.
President Biden plans to sign the bill today. The latest Bloomberg News Morning Consult swing state poll shows any post-state of the union bounce that President Biden may have enjoyed last month is now all but gone. Bloomberg Government's Jonathan Tamari has more.
President Biden was polling slightly better after that State of the Union speech, but the numbers have kind of returned to their previous baseline where Trump is leading by about 6% overall when you look at 7 of the most important swing states, and individually he's leading in 6 of those 7 states.
Bloomberg Government's John Tamari reports the economy remains voters' biggest concern. Fewer than 1 in 5 see inflation or borrowing costs getting lower by the end of the year. Another state approves arming teachers in classrooms. The Tennessee State Legislature passed it. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it. With the Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
I'm Michael Barr. Thanks so much. Bloomberg Surveillance. We're brought to you by Interactive Brokers. Discover the future of trading with their next generation trading platforms, IBKR Desktop. IBKR Desktop. You can download it, IBKR Desktop, at ibkr.com/desktop. And we thank Interactive Brokers for foundational support of what we do in equities, bonds, commodities. And Paul, 7 p.m. tonight, what does the Bank of Japan do?
Yep.
I mean, the more, can
here,
they
yep.
get to Friday? I mean, well, they love to do this over the weekend. So they got Monday morning there is Sunday evening, 7 p.m.
Start
time. You're coming off the tees. You're coming off the links. And, I don't think they can get to the weekend. I
don't know.
I mean, there's a trend here. We had a 155 print on yen.
Yeah, we had a 155 print, Tom. It's just been extraordinarily weak yen here. And the question is, will there be Bank of Japan intervention here? Maybe we'll get, if we can track down, Mr. Sassauer on one of the golf links. He's at Peachtree, okay.
Maybe on the 9th hole there.
Yep.
He gets
it's
out.
a turn.
It's a turn. There's a chance. Again, off Tesla, NASDAQ 100 up 0.7%. Let me give you levels right now. 51.17 on SPX. Dow 38,699. This is on futures. NASDAQ, I think it's 100. NASDAQ 100, 17,000. I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah.
17,000.
Amazing. Yep.
I'm not used to that. 17,700. Small caps are red today. I don't know. We'll see. We'll get through the day. Bitcoin, look for it at 10 a.m. Who's on with you today? Any idea?
No idea. It comes.
Maybe it's you, Michael Barr.
It could be. It could be. We have no idea.
Let's throw the dice.
That's how we roll. Bloomberg Intelligence.
We'll have to see. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. The rally in stocks continue as earnings season picks up pace and technology shares start to power ahead. All eyes will be on Meta after the bell today. Bloomberg Intelligence says profits from the Magnificent Seven, they're forecast to rise about 40% in the first quarter from a year ago. NASDAQ futures leading the charge up 0.6%. S&P futures up 0.1%. Dow futures, actually they're down 0.1%. To the yields, the 2-year yield at 4.95%. That's up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.65%. That's up 4 basis points. To commodities, spot gold lower 2,319 an ounce. We have Brent crude $88 a barrel. Over to Bitcoin at 66,430. To earnings, Heineken, they're up nearly 2% in Amsterdam. The brewer reported first quarter organic beer volume and revenue ahead of estimates. And then Amazon and Microsoft investments into artificial intelligence startups, well, they're getting deeper scrutiny from the UK's antitrust watchdog. They're trying to figure out whether the $4 billion collaboration between Amazon and Anthropic threatens competition in the UK. We have Amazon up about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. We're into equities. We're into earnings season and all that. Yesterday, we decided to really fold in a lot of fixed income voices.
Right.
And we got to diverge here from Meta and Boeing and all the rest and just get back to the coupon as well. Joining us now, Alex Petrone. Director of Fixed Income, Rockefeller Asset Management, under the Ruchir Sharma view here, this of managing money. What's short term for the Rockefeller Asset Management Company? Can I imagine it's 3 years as short term, or are you guys day trading off Robinhood?
Well, we're certainly not day trading off of Robinhood. A lot of the investments that we make on behalf of our clients are really focused on long-term investments. I would say short-term is thinking about a cyclical time frame of 6 to 12 months, as well as then medium-term in that 3 to 5, and then longer-term trends are really playing out over a period of 5 to 10 years. So what we're doing day in and day out as we invest on behalf of our clients is thinking about some of the themes that are going to impact rates, credit spreads, different structures over the period of the next 3 to 6 to 12 months, and then trying to lean in or lean out of the market, whether it's rates and curve or credit and various sectors at different points in time, depending on what we see occurring in terms of technicals, in terms of the data that is coming in recently that's causing a lot of rate volatility and maybe a view that the Fed is not going to ease quite as much as people had hoped or anticipated at the start of the year.
Well, in the fixed income space, Alex, you can sit in a 2-year treasury and get close to 5%. That's not a bad trade. Should I be taking credit risk, or should I just be sitting there in some of that government paper?
I think there's benefit to diversifying your assets, both in terms of how we think about duration and spots on the yield curve, as well as thinking about credit. We absolutely are encouraging investors to barbell their approach to fixed income today. We agree 5% is really compelling. So if we get into this environment where yields stay higher for longer, this is fantastic for fixed income investors. Yeah. What we want to be mindful of is there's the base case that the Fed eases 1 to 2, maybe 3 times this year, though I think they're going to walk back that median dot plot when they release the next dot plot in June. But we do have to be mindful of tail risks that are forming. So when opportunities present themselves either in munis, taking advantage of a steep yield curve, locking in some duration, or differing spots on the treasury curve, corporates which spreads are tight, but balance sheets are healthy and you're picking up a lot of excess yield, we think a diversified approach makes a lot of sense here.
You mentioned munis. I know you have some experience in munis. I'm a big fan of the New Jersey municipal bond market. Talk to us about your advice you're giving your clients these days about municipal bonds. Is it state specific, or is it just an asset class you want to have some exposure to?
You absolutely want exposure to munis. I would say both investment grade as well as high yield.
See how her voice changes? She's it's like, she's at Harvard and she's like, Harvard Fellows muni bonds. They're like, they trade for 1%. I mean, continue.
There's several reasons to have enthusiasm around munis. Number one, tax efficiency. If you look at yields, whether it's investment grade around a 370 or the high yield muni index closer to, call it, a 560. That's really compelling. 6% plus, 9% plus tax equivalent yields in an area of the market where balance sheets remain quite healthy. So for those of us that don't love taxes, you absolutely want to be.
You're in a meeting at Rockefeller with Risher Sharma, and you're looking at the triple B minus Chicago GOs.
Yes.
What do you do with the Chicago GO as they look to bankruptcy? I mean, it's like the new California.
I think
explain that to Risher. He's listening.
Is certainly maybe a jump from what the balance sheet looks like today. And if you look at Illinois, Moody's, Monday, the state level, positive outlook, you've had 5 balanced budgets coming from the state of Illinois. Who would have thought that, right, Tom, 10 years ago? But what you've seen in the last several years, really post-GFC, is municipalities being financially responsible. Now, you still have to do your homework, right? Bottom-up research matters. There's bifurcation in key sectors, but we think it's really prudent for investors to have that allocation to investment grade, separate accounts, focused on high grade, but also an allocation to high yield and all the opportunities
Thanksgiving dinner, you're with the fam. They turn to you and they say, we want to take advantage of tax-free bonds. That's the way it always goes. How should mere mortals buy municipal bonds?
Well, they should absolutely use a professional such as RAM to really focus on doing that bottom-up research from credit, optimizing yield curve, really leaning in and out of the market depending on the seasonals and
But should they be buying individual paper, Nuveen unit trusts out of Chicago,
We should buy
funds, ETFs, which?
Individual bonds for your separate account using an asset manager, and then funds within the high yield space, which is why we're expanding and really excited and enthusiastic about 3 veteran high yield portfolio managers that are coming in-house in the coming
months.
What is
this, an HR call?
It absolutely is, Tom. Absolutely.
I've got the laddered muni portfolio.
I'll bet you do.
And we talked about this last time,
we
Paul,
did.
and you still have the ladder.
I do.
Optimize that yield curve. Let's chat offline.
Okay, very good.
We'll chat offline. Who's taking over the show, Lisa? Help me out here.
Exactly.
Okay, I got one more question before this interview goes down in flames. And that is, how do you barbell muni bonds? Because so much of retail looks at moderate duration. They're yield hogs. They want to go out 20, 30, 40 years. I've got the Austrian piece. That worked out. But where's your duration on a barbell? What are you trying to find?
In the current market today, we're really favoring intermediate duration. So I think 4.5 years. If you look at the municipal yield curve, it's fascinating for people like me. It looks like the Big Dipper. Inversion, flat, steepness as you get out past 12 years. There's an opportunity there to lock in higher tax-exempt yields, get some duration exposure. If the economy slows more than expected, I've heard some others earlier say the economy is hot, and there's truth to that, but it's a bifurcated economy. And not all company balance sheets are feeling the strength of the economy today, not all households.
The problem is my portfolio looks like Cassiopeia. We're doing constellations today. This has been phenomenal. We don't do enough on tax-free bonds.
I know.
Alex Petrone, thank you so much for the Rockefeller Center. Well, I call it the Rockefeller Center. I'm sorry. Rockefeller Asset Management. Thank you,
Wonderful.
Alex.
Thank you.
This was just absolutely brilliant. I can't say enough, folks, about how everybody in the media ignores munis, and it's at your peril. Paul, explain this.
Sure.
I mean,
well,
at tax time, you look at it, you go, well, that worked out.
That worked out great. At Bloomberg Intelligence show from 10 to 12, every Friday, Tom, we have a sponsored segment, Munis in Focus. So we do that, absolutely. Build America Mutual, they do those insured.
Well, they had a huge impact. They came out and really legitimately.
And we got this guy. At Bloomberg. He's like our secret weapon. Joe Mysak.
He's like legendary.
He's a legend in the mutual
Alex has
bond
his
space.
photo up in the cubicle. The cubicle at Rockefeller. I mean,
he likes all we talk about is the Dream Mall over there in the swamps of Jersey, and how that didn't have it's financed municipal bonds.
That
didn't
worked
have
out.
a shot. Didn't have a shot from the get-go. So there
we'll
they are.
Talk about that for all of you worldwide. Alex Petrone with Rockefeller. We're on Apple CarPlay, Android Play, and of course on YouTube. Bloomberg, you download, you search Bloomberg Podcast. Why are we doing this? So we got to get back on track here. I think Kriti Gupta's getting a British accent.
Maybe.
She's starting to sound, it's either Julie Andrews or she sounded like, one of the Spice Girls. I don't know which. First big hit, it was the breakout for Sporty Spice, Wannabe.
If you want to be my lover, you have got to give. Taking is too easy, but
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
Why are we upset if we're creating jobs?
Inflation's still a thing out there for the everyday consumer.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
The economic calendar jam-packed today.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, two rock stars in the studio. We're going to get right to it now. The Interactive Broker Studios, red and green on the screen, NASDAQ with a Tesla lift. Tesla's like yesterday. We're going to talk Meta. We're going to talk Microsoft on YouTube, Apple CarPlay, Global Wall Street. Tune in from the Interactive Broker Studio, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And yes, the NASDAQ leading the charge up 0.4%. We have S&P futures, Dow futures. They are little changed. But a big part of NASDAQ future, Tesla shares up 11%. You said it. The big focus turns to Meta. They're up 2% right now. Also IBM. That'll be later this afternoon. Tomorrow, Microsoft, Alphabet. Let's get to earnings. This morning, we had Boeing. Right now, first quarter revenue beat Wall Street estimates. The company burned through $3.93 billion in cash, but it was a little bit less dramatic of a cash burn than analysts expected. That's why those shares are higher. They're up 3%. AT&T up 4%. Topped estimates for profit in the first quarter, added more wireless phone customers than expected. And Hilton up 4%. Reporting earnings beat forecasts. Over to the bond market, 2-year yield 4.94%, up 1 basis point. The 10-year yield at 4.65%, up 4 basis points. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much. They are the giants of Bloomberg Intelligence. They came in. I was like, what are we doing?
I know.
Anurag Rana in Chicago's encyclopedic in a cloud, and Mandeep Singh picks up the pieces on Meta as well. Thrilled to have them with us right now into this tech earnings season. I guess I got to go to Meta first. Facebook is what I call it. Like, they changed the symbol.
I know.
Mandeep saying just simply, Zuckerberg, did he start all this cost cutting? Is Zuckerberg the one that gave the billionaire set permission to cut costs?
Yeah, and he was quite aggressive, and he was right in terms of pivoting to AI and the cost cuts.
It's up 358% from the Mandeep Singh bottom. After Singh said, shut up and buy it.
Yeah, look, I think everyone had their doubts whether this company can ever grow double-digit again, the top line, and they have shown, they have executed around the cost cuts, and also from a product perspective, they have made a lot of changes in terms of the ad stack, pivot to AI. I think kind of moving away from metaverse last year was a great bet. And it's paid off in terms of, what they are doing with ad impressions and pricing versus what the other players are doing.
Hey, Anurag, out in Chicago, the tech hub of Chicago, I got the stock at Microsoft. I'm surprised it's only up 8% year to date. I thought it would have been more. It seems like these guys are just hitting on all cylinders. It's a great AI play. What is the story on Microsoft these days? What do you expect to hear from them, see from them from their earnings?
It's still trading at over 30 times earnings compared to, Apple at 23 times. So always remember that, the market cap is so high at this point. So some of those expectations are already baked in for what they're going to realize, whether it's on the AI side or whether it's on the, the GitHub or Office 365. So there's a lot of that, I would say, is currently baked into the price.
Oh, good.
No, I was going to say, Mandeep, Facebook, Google, again, Tom and I, we go old school verbiage here. Facebook, Google, it's a play on digital advertising in very large part. What's the state of the digital advertising market out there? Because you look to linear television and all they have is healthcare ads for various diseases. They don't have any real advertisers anymore. Are they all on digital?
And so that secular move is still playing out. I would say that, the sentiment around small businesses is still pretty weak. And when you look at a company like Meta, they are exposed more to small business ad spending. So I'm surprised they're able to grow top line 25%, even with the SMB spending being weak. And some of it is easier comps, so that'll get tougher in the second half, but still, it's pretty remarkable.
And now for all of you worldwide, we go CFA with Anurag Rana and Mandeep Singh. Okay, I want to look at discounted cash flow, and there's this idea of terminal value. Now, the triple leveraged all cash fund is on a perpetuity terminal value. I mean, we're just going out forever. Mandeep Singh, in tech in general, in these magnificent 4, 5, 6, 8, whatever it is, How do you study terminal value, or is that impossible?
No, I think with companies of these sizes, in terms of where their top line is, clearly, for them to keep growing double digit, it's extremely tough. And so you got to model in growth decelerating. But what they have shown us in the past 18 months is there's so much leverage to be gained from cost cuts. They were not running efficiently, and that's what I think is a key driver of
Nicely
EPS.
framed here. Anurag, Rana, how do you do a terminal value, for example, on Microsoft? Because I got double-digit revenue growth. I got to model that in. Maybe it's a harmonic deceleration, whatever you're doing. And Mandeep correctly says there's a new religion in cost cuts. So where's your terminal on Microsoft? Do you go out a decade?
Yeah, and with Microsoft, there's a slight difference because they are spending a lot on data centers. So I have a concept that is, you want to look at operating cash flow more than you want to look at free cash flow right now because their capex is more than 3 times. So if you see the operating cash flow growing at the pace it is, it's actually getting to a point that's it's getting better than Apple at this point, with the potential of growing top line between 10 to 15% at least for the next 5 years. So I think Microsoft is in a better position than any other tech company right now, in our view, because of the ability to drive those operating cash flows.
And Tom, just looking at the FA function for Microsoft, CapEx in their fiscal 2020 year was $15 billion. This year, for the June 24 year, $43 billion is the forecast.
The operating margin on Microsoft, folks, is 40%, 42, 44%. When do these get too big, Mandeep? I mean, the first business book I read was Ida Tarbell, Standard Oil. I'm 15 years old. I'm reading Ida Tarbell.
Nice.
I didn't have a life.
Explains a lot, right, Lisa?
Okay, but thank you, Lisa. When do they just get too big for Washington? I mean, if you extrapolate out Anurag Rana's operating cash flow, there's a point where they're too big, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I would use Meta as a proxy. Before they started investing in Reality Labs, their operating margin was north of 50%. So it got to a point where they had to do something with all the cash that they were generating, and they started investing in Reality Labs. And look, the regulators, they are looking at all of these companies, including the partnerships. That's a new way to acquire for a lot of these companies. But in the end, they are terrific business models, and they are sustainable.
Free cash flow pre-pandemic, Facebook, 21 gazillion. It's a double, 43 gazillion up to 48 gazillion. Mandeep Singh, Anurag Rana, when do they get too big?
See, I would say for a software company, something between 45 and 50% is achievable. I remember covering Visa and MasterCard about 15 years, 20 years ago. Right now, their margins are 55% and somewhere in that range. So operating margins for software companies, probably peak around 50%. And we only have a handful of companies right around that mark. Adobe is somewhere closer, and Microsoft's going to get there between 45 and 50.
Good morning, Meredith Whitney. Did you see Visa's earnings report?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like there's a printing press.
People are spending like crazy. Anurag, as we head into this tech earnings season here, how much are we going to hear about AI? Is it going to be every other word, every third word? Where are we in kind of the development, the evolution of AI? I know you and Mandeep and your teams have done a lot of research on this.
I would say very early innings, and I think this is not going to change at least for the next few years when we see more and more product development from all these companies. Right now, barring Microsoft, none of the big software companies have been able to monetize it in a proper way. And I think the next year we're going to see more monetization, but more new products coming out because right now we are seeing the bulk of the investments going into the hardware and the infrastructure piece of it.
My head is spinning over where we are versus like Nifty 50 of my Ute.
I know.
Or like you mentioned Ken Olsen and Decker earlier. I mean, this is totally different than 1998, 1999. I mean, there was a lot of nonprofit going on. All these people is it basically on a 90-day basis they're minting money and we have the distraction of what Tim and Carol do at 4 p.m.?
And they have the deep pockets to invest. So the one big difference here is all these companies that are investing in CapEx, they can afford to do that and without a big hit to their margin. So clearly, I think the fact that they have the data and the CapEx wherewithal, That's what
Okay.
drives these.
Okay, I got 10 seconds. I'm so sorry. Are we going to hear share buyback announcements?
Yes.
You got to be kidding me.
Meta announced a dividend that was symbolic, even
Yep.
though less than 1% dividend
Right.
yield. But clearly,
than
Google is on the verge of doing something similar. The street is
Okay.
expecting. So,
right.
waiting to hear.
This
on
is
that.
fun. Let's do this again. Anurag, Rana in Chicago, Mandeep Singh with their studios in New York. Your tech as we drive this afternoon's Meta earnings. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, and Lisa. There's late word Israel has hit 40 Hezbollah sites in southern Lebanon. The Israeli military says its fighter jets and artillery struck the sites, including storage facilities, weaponry, and infrastructure used by the organization. The latest attack comes amid rising tensions between Israel and the Iran-backed group, which is based in Lebanon and has many fighters near the border. A foreign aid spending package is heading to President Biden's desk. Last night, the Senate approved a $95 billion foreign aid package that includes funding to support Ukraine, Israel, and Indo-Pacific allies. The bill cleared the Senate with overwhelming bipartisan support. 79 senators voted for the bill. After the vote, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said the bill makes clear that America stands with its allies.
To our friends in Israel, America will soon deliver aid to help you fight the scourge of Hamas and stand up to Iran. To innocent civilians in Gaza in the midst of a war, and to those around the world who face hunger, America will deliver food and medicine and clothing.
President Biden is expected to sign the bill this morning and will carry the comments from the president live on Bloomberg. Joe Biden and Donald Trump cemented their front-runner status even further in last night's Pennsylvania primary. But it could hold a warning sign for the former president, as we hear from Bloomberg Government's Jonathan Tamari.
We saw Nikki Haley get 150,000 votes, somewhere in the ballpark of 15 to 16% of the Republican vote there. And that could be really notable because that's, the Pennsylvania was decided by about 80,000 votes last election. So that's twice that number. And if those are Republicans who are willing to come out and say they won't support Trump, that's something to keep an eye on.
Bloomberg Government's Jonathan Tamari in Washington. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
And Michael Barr, thanks so much. That was great, Paul, having Mandeep and Anurag together. I mean, the brain power there. And the terminal value question, I never was a big fan of all the plug and chug of discounted cash flow. There's too many moving parts. I'm not sure what it really had to do with getting to a successful outcome of creating alpha. It was a great exercise.
It was. I mean, as a junior analyst in investment banking teams, we basically lived with our discounted cash flow models.
Yeah.
And you figured out very clearly you could get to any value you wanted by just playing around a little bit with that discounted with the discount rate and the terminal value, and
you can play with it.
Yeah,
That's
whatever your managing director wanted to see, I could get you.
You could get you there. Exactly. Well, and this is really important, folks, and it's an inverse relationship with the rate. It gets a little confusing, but this terminal value.
Yes.
Okay, you give me a toothpaste company, you give me a 7-year terminal value, I could get there. It's a unit, it's stable. How do you do a 5 or 7 year value?
Yeah.
On one of these juggernauts? I just don't get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Tesla helping out the NASDAQ up 0.5%. Everything else is churning here into earnings season. This afternoon, Meta from New York City. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have a mixed look before the bell. The NASDAQ right now, NASDAQ futures leading the advance up 0.5%. S&P futures little change. Dow futures down 0.1%. The 2-year yield at 4.94%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.64%. That's up 3 basis points. To commodities, we have spot gold lower at $2,321 an ounce, and Brent crude at $88 a barrel. To earnings, we'll start with Biogen up 6%. Reported first quarter profit beat expectations. The company cut costs in its new Alzheimer's drug. Well, that's starting to gain some momentum. And then you have insurer Humana up more than 1%. Pulled its 2025 guidance. Pressures rising on its Medicare business. And software giant Oracle might be looking to get closer at the healthcare industry. It's planning to make Nashville its world headquarters to be closer to that major healthcare hub. Yeah. Those shares up 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Oh, boy. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you for putting it in. Oracle moving around the country. There's a huge pressure to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. In the right place at the right time yesterday, the Economic Club of New York, full disclosure, I'm a member, James Dimon, J.P. Morgan, grilled, and some really interesting comments. We get a debrief from Gerard Cassidy with Tucker Anthony and R.L. Day. I love that.
I love that.
I just love to say Cassidy because Tom, no one remembers when Truman was president. Gerard Cassidy with us, of course, with RBC Capital Markets. Gerard, just simply, does J.P. Morgan have to apologize for making too much money?
Tom, I don't think so, and thank you for having me on the program. The leadership of Jamie Dimon has been extraordinary for that organization. As you well know, you've seen it as I have over the last 20 plus years. And he's taken it to a level that is very, very profitable. They've organized the company along all the different lines of businesses. It's very well diversified from consumer lending all the way up to investment banking. But at the same time, they are very disciplined, they're well managed, and they have a very deep bench. So I don't think they need to apologize. The market is what it is. And they're taking advantage of the conditions of today's markets.
Paul, operating income pre-pandemic, $45 billion. It went down. And now it's not a double, but it's $72 billion. I mean, I'm sorry, they're putting it on each and every quarter.
You know, hey, Gerard, one of my former employers, what is now Citigroup, I'm seeing that stock finally this year putting some performance like we haven't seen in such a long time. How do you think about it? Jane Fraser and what's going on at Citi these days?
It's certainly a classic turnaround story, but a very big one. She's turning around an ocean liner, which takes time. And why the stock is doing better this year is that she's showing some initial signs of success. She's been able to divest some of the businesses that have been identified for divestiture outside the United States. But also, she's had a reorganizational plan that she put in place that is focused on lowering operating costs. So this is kind of a self-help story with the operating costs coming down. You know, the big divestiture coming still is Banamex Mexico, the consumer business. Right. That should be separated by the end of the year, and then hopefully will be IPO'd next year. So don't get me wrong. I mean, it is a turnaround story, but it's not in the same class, of course, as a J.P. Morgan or even Bank of America or Wells for that matter.
All right, Gerard. You're in Portland, Maine. How he worked that out, Tom, I have no idea. I mean, he gets to get all the benefits of being a New York top big dog.
He bought Maine. After he had a Hinckley Bermuda.
Okay.
And he got rid of that and he got some other Hinckley. I can't remember. And now he's got the 40S picnic boat.
Okay.
And he said to RBC Capital Markets, he said, look, I'll pop it into Portland. Yep. Everybody come visit.
Yes.
That's what they do.
That's how they do it. Gerard has figured this game out. Gerard, we step back and we look at your bank coverage. Higher rates for longer. How do you position that? How do you kind of put your coverage in a world where maybe rates might be a little bit higher than we initially thought coming into this year?
It is certainly, Paul. I mean, when you think about the forward curve in January, calling for, I think it was around 6 rate cuts. That certainly hasn't played out already. We're down to about 1 to 2 rate cuts. And if we have 1 to 2 rate cuts, and Tom might remember this, back in 1995, that was when Greenspan orchestrated the Goldilocks economy. And he cut rates twice, in July of 95 and December of 95, having raised them as recently as February of 95. And that was a great year for bank stocks. And I think higher for longer with 1 to 2 rate cuts for the regional banks as well as the money center universal banks, we would view very positively, because what's going to happen is funding costs will stabilize, but earning asset yields will continue to rise, widening out the spreads and making the banks more profitable.
What is their relationship now with Washington? We're out of the pandemic. They get bigger and bigger. You know, there's the mid-cap, the small-cap soap opera. But whatever interest rates do, what is the new relationship of our top 5 banks with Washington?
Tom, I think the relationship is steady. There's always conflict, of course. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that is one of the regulatory agencies that is at odds with the big banks, particularly over more recently credit card fees, lowering them. But in terms of the primary regulators, the Federal Reserve, the controller of the currency, and the FDIC, they work closely with the banks. I wouldn't say it's an adversarial relationship, not at all, but it's not as strong as, for example, up in Canada. When you look at those 5 big banks, including my own, they work very closely with OSFI, that's the big regulator.
It's like you read my script. Paul, help me here. Are we becoming Canada? It's just as simple as that. That's a timeless question. Cassidy has lived it, and I'm sorry. I mean, that's on a profitability basis.
Yeah.
Particularly with the digital overlay, that's where we're heading.
Yeah, it's interesting. Hey, Gerard, looking at your coverage, I see some of the 2 big investment banks, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley. You have them rated sector perform. What's your more cautious view on the investment banks vis-a-vis, say, some of the big money center banks?
What we're looking at, Paul, is is this new surge in investment banking activity for real? Is this sustainable? And if it is, then we need to reconsider those ratings. And that's what we're wrestling with literally as we speak. The first quarter numbers, as you saw, for investment banking, particularly debt capital markets and equity capital markets, were strong year over year. FICC trading was a little weaker, but equity trading was strong. There is the anticipation that if we really are in a soft landing or the growth of this economy is around 2% this year, M&A will pick up. So it's a real debate we're having internally. Should we start to change?
Small bank, single best idea. Gerard Cassidy, what do you have for me today?
It's not as small as it used to be, but Tom, we got to look at Popular out of Puerto Rico. It is. I got to tell you, Puerto Rico has turned around. All those unfortunate natural disasters have led to enormous amounts of federal aid. The area is growing, and Popular has a 40% market share, and they are very profitable, and they benefit from this higher for longer, better than most banks. And that would be it's not the little community bank that we normally talk about, but I tell you, Popular is the name, Tom.
That's great.
That's a good one.
I mean, that's single best idea. Gerard Cassidy, thank you so much. RBC Capital Market. We'll fold that into our podcast today. That's where the name comes from, single best idea.
Boom, Gerard
You're in a
Cassidy.
meeting. Lisa, the way it works, you're in a meeting, and it's like, you're trying to get to lunch, but you got to get there early because you need to get a seat. And you're with some blowhard named Paul Sweeney, and on about Disney, and you just cut him short. You go, Paul, what's your single best idea?
Yep.
And it just stops because that's what people want to know.
Yeah.
Buy, hold, sell. What's your single best idea?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pain, but.
Yeah. But Gerard Cassidy, he's been doing this for decades at RBC Capital Markets, 31 years at that
Popular.
firm. Yeah.
Brilliant. I know nothing, I can't.
Stock's up about 7% year to date, up 50% over the trailing 12 months basis, 6.3 billion market cap. So there you go.
Yeah, here's the research analysis on that, folks. Use of the terminal. Mateo, 0. Keene, 0. Sweeney all over it. You just got that. Boom.
Yeah, it's good.
Banco Popular.
This Bloomberg terminal thing.
Red and green on the screen. NASDAQ up 0.6%, led by the lift in Tesla. What do you see, a lift in Meta this afternoon? Carol Massar, Tim Stenovit.
Oh, nailed it.
Did I nail it?
Yeah. Kind of.
I'm working kind of. Oh, that's good.
Close enough.
The Tim and Carol show this afternoon with Meta from New York City. Maybe I'll be here tomorrow. Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. And earnings, they continue to come in fast and furious. Yesterday was about Tesla. This morning we've heard from the likes of Boeing, AT&T, Hilton. This afternoon, all eyes turn to Meta. We'll also hear from IBM and from Ford. So how will the markets react to another round of earnings? We're just getting started, so let's get to it right now. The S&P 500 up 0.3%. We have the Dow. That is little change right now. I'm waiting for the NASDAQ to come in. Right now, it is up 0.6%. There you go. To the 2-year yield at 4.93%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.63%, and that's up 3 basis points. To commodities, we'll check spot gold lower, $2,321 an ounce. Brent crude, $88 a barrel. At the open, we want to check in with Meta since we mentioned it, up nearly 2%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Thank you so much. I can't say it sounds easy. She makes it sound easy. It is so hard to open the market. There's like 47 moving parts that Lisa Mateo's looking at. It's just a real challenge to get it just in the first couple of minutes. Even after the first 10 minutes, it's still hugely fluid. This is well timed. And it goes back, and it's a real personal moment for me because one of the sea change moments for me, it's Paul, I could only shave like once a week, and I faked it.
Back in the day?
I had a fake mustache and all that.
Oh, man.
And,
Lisa, what are you thinking about that?
John Galbraith, who ran a small shop called Templeton, and they had this oddball, I think it was in Bermuda, and Mr. Galbraith called me up because of, it doesn't matter why. Would you like to come up and meet John Templeton?
Nice.
And there I was at 24 in a private conversation with Sir John, which I can, I can remember. It's like you meeting Bruce.
Sure.
I mean, the times you've met Bruce. I mean, you remember every second of it. And it changed my life. And of course, Templeton went through their magic with value investing, including the Franklin Templeton Institute. And then they teamed up with people at Franklin. And one of the mainstays there over the decades has been out of Vanguard, but now with Franklin Templeton has been Stephen Dover. And he joins us now. This is very cool.
It's big.
Very,
New
very
York.
cool.
Usually you have to go to San Mateo to see this guy.
Yeah.
Now he's coming here.
You're too kind.
Why don't you
Thank
bring
you.
him in?
Stephen Dover joins us. He's the chief market strategist for Franklin Templeton. Steve, I mean, this market coming off that October low, we've had a heck of a performance here. Is it real? Are you buying it? Are we still fully invested? Tom wants to know if he needs to be fully invested in this market.
Great question. Of course, John Templeton's famous value manager. And probably the biggest debate we've had over the last 15, 20 years is what is value and how do we define that in different ways. Certainly, if you'd asked me about Tesla and its earnings being down so much that Tesla would be up 10% today because of that rather brilliant announcement about lower cost cars, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Right.
We met with all the CIOs. Franklin Templeton is now a huge company.
Yep.
We have a lot of value, a lot of growth, and all of the managers now that I polled last week think we're kind of in a fair value place with the market right now. We were expecting a pullback. We got that, and so the market's probably about fair right now.
How about earnings here? We're getting into the teeth of earnings. You mentioned Tesla reporting some numbers last night. What are you looking for in earnings? Do we need to see earnings rise appreciably to support this market?
Yeah, so I think forecasts for earnings are probably a little ahead of what we think is going to be here. But yeah, this is going to be an earnings market. It's not going to get the wind at its back from dropping interest rates, likely, right? And so that's where we think earnings are very important. Now, we're looking for, obviously, these big cap earnings with Mag 7, but we're also looking for opportunities and where we think there are opportunities around the around those growth stocks that are underneath the big cap 7. Here's what I found interesting. And when we're talking about John Templeton, and in the same breath, we're talking about technology and AI and these big growth stocks. You'd have thought a value manager would avoid that. And so to me, it was interesting talking to our CIOs that they're all pretty confident that AI really is going to change the market. Yep. Now, value managers aren't going to jump in that, but how can they participate in that? And I think an answer is when you look at it from a broader market perspective, and for example, the amazing amount of energy that AI takes, or the digital economy takes, you might invest in utilities, for example. So that's what we're doing in the value funds.
So give us a sense of what sectors are looking attractive to you now. I'm not sure if your CIOs screen or how they think about that, but there are some sectors that you guys feel pretty comfortable adding capital to?
Yeah, well, I just mentioned in some cases utilities. I think that's where the value guys are looking. Our growth investors aren't backing off on technology. They might be backing off a little bit on the Mag 7, but they're seeing other opportunities within, just below the Mag 7. I can't be a Templeton guy without talking a little bit outside of the United States. We still see some opportunities in Japan. I know we're talking about Japan and the possible central bank influence today, but Japan for the first time is experiencing some inflation. The big issue on international equities, but fixed income too, is the dollar. And I've got to say, I've been wrong. Most of the procrastinators have been wrong.
Get in line.
Saying, this dollar's not going to go up forever.
In the time we've got left, I mean, folks, Stephen Dover plays it down, but he has arguably the most interesting mutual fund resume out there. Bradesco or Brazil tie-in that they had, and of course his work with Vanguard, and now spearheading Franklin Templeton in so many ways. There it was, I think, a year ago, and I believe January 1, all of a sudden Putnam is with Franklin Templeton. There seems to be an asset management roll-up. We don't have to belabor the point. But where is the active management industry in 5 years? Are they all going to be owned by Franklin Templeton?
Well, I think there's consolidation. But you can only have so much consolidation because obviously the active management industry is losing assets overall. I think the big change is going to be the form. We all three of us grew up with mutual funds.
And we're going to ETFs.
And we're going to ETFs. We're going to different sophisticated. I think the digital economy is going to make different ways to have active management.
Right.
Here's the thing about John Templeton, famous equity manager, but in his fund, when it made sense, he put gold in it. He put bonds in it. So I think active management, you always got to have that when you're looking between asset classes, even if that's between
I don't want to
ETFs.
get you in trouble with the general counsel, Franklin Templeton, but Lisa, let's go there. You're on a first-name basis with him. I see leverage keep creeping in now. We got the double-leveraged NVIDIA, this. Are you guys going to go to the siren call of leverage within new modern ETF structures? To me, that's almost sacrilegious. But it's got to be a huge temptation.
Yeah, I don't have full insight into the firm in that, but to the best of my knowledge, no, that really isn't a direction. That isn't the type of thing that we want to do.
Does it scream bull market, Paul? I'm sorry. Leverage.
Yeah.
Like the triple leveraged all cash fund.
Exactly. I mean, so
and at these interest rates, why would you do that?
Right.
We're arguing the opposite. We're arguing get out of cash, get into some fixed income.
Okay, on the fixed income side, do I sit my 2-year treasury close to 5%, or do I take some credit risk here?
Well, the credit spreads have tightened so much. When we talk, I can't remember when we last talked, but it was end of year, January. We were arguing credit spreads. Hard to argue that now. The absolutely first thing I have to say is get out of that cash and get some duration. But 10-year treasury looks pretty good right now. That's not a mutual fund idea.
The heritage of Franklin was you turn the industry on its ear in municipal bonds.
Yes.
And part of that was California and a real deal. It's like it's island nation. It's like its own country.
And that's it. That is, I heard earlier on your call, you were talking to someone about muni bonds. That isn't talked about enough. So for those investors that are outside of their qualified accounts, muni bonds make a lot of sense. There's a great after-tax yield. Chances of taxes going up 2025 very high, especially for bigger earners. Muni bonds make a whole lot of sense right now.
Yeah, what do we do with a failure of the defined contribution program? I would suggest ERISA 74 has been a failure. There's a huge body of America not prepared for retirement. You guys led on this, along with other shops as well. How do we fix the American retirement system to get people to invest more?
Boy, we could have a whole show on that, and that is
we're thinking about it. Stay around.
Yeah, you should. That is so insightful. I think that is a big failure, right? All three of us looked back at Chile, and Chile was kind of the whole country went towards that, and that didn't happen as well. People haven't saved as much as we hoped they would. and they don't have the savings that they had. I think we have to look, probably the short answer to that is we have to provide, as an industry, some annuity products that actually aren't these high fee products that really don't make sense. Annuities are very unpopular. By the way, Franklin Templeton doesn't offer them, so I'm not pushing anything. But that's what people need. They need to know that they're going to have a secure income. Here's what we found out. We were looking at investors as a whole instead of as individuals. And investors as a whole can take risk, but investors as individuals cannot. And that's the problem. That's why we need some type of defined plan as a base for, at least for middle America.
It's been hugely valuable. Stephen Dover, thank you so much with Franklin Templeton and this whole generational and regulatory shift we're going through in the mutual fund business. Red and green industry, NASDAQ rockets. I mean, Paul, what do I do? I'm up 0.9%.
Sure, because you're long
NASDAQ
Tesla.
100,
You're thinking, are you going to go out to the showroom this weekend, take a look at Tesla? You and Ed Ludlow? Yeah. No?
Maybe. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. President Biden is expected to sign $95 billion in aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan today. The Defense Department has promised the first tranche of $1 billion in artillery shells and air defenses for Ukraine before this week is out. Bloomberg's Rosalind Matheson reports the assistance can't come soon enough for Ukraine's beleaguered front line.
It's at a point where Ukraine needs to regain momentum, and that's always difficult when you're behind and you need to recover, and Russia's got the momentum at the moment. And then beyond this aid package, anything further is going to be very, very difficult given the political climate in the US.
Bloomberg's Roz Matheson reporting from our European headquarters in London. Bloomberg will carry President Biden's remarks during the signing this morning, expected around 10 a.m. Wall Street time. The Supreme Court is hearing a case that could have implications for abortion bans that have been enacted when Roe versus Wade was overturned 2 years ago. At issue is a law in Idaho. The Biden administration says that it violates a federal law that ensures emergency room care to all patients when their lives are at risk. Martha Speaker is the director of court and litigation communications at Planned Parenthood.
The Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, shorthand EMTALA, it's been law for nearly 40 years. The court's going to decide whether to carve out abortion from this law, which has been understood for decades to protect all patients who go to hospitals for emergency care.
U.S. health officials say samples of pasteurized milk have tested positive for remnants of the bird flu virus, but the country's milk supply is safe. The FDA says bird flu was found but inactive, and the discovery doesn't represent the actual virus. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Paul, I thought that was just fascinating with Stephen Dover. Just about where it's become, like the shock of Putnam being taken out and, just the entire struggle about active management shows how far we've come.
I don't know where a Franklin Templeton, a T. Rowe Price, where they fit in an ETF world. I don't know what the answer is. I mean, do you convert your mutual funds to ETFs? Do you just start cranking out new ETFs? I don't know how that works.
And for those of you on YouTube, behind me is the Bloomberg Museum. The rumors are going to put me in it someday, embalm me or whatever. But the answer is it is the heritage of Bloomberg, and so much of the trading shift of narrowing spreads had to do with the invention of this machine 1 million years ago. I mean, it was just amazing overnight how that changed the fixed income business.
It did. I mean, the Bloomberg terminal, it's just extraordinary here, particularly, initially for fixed income, but now for everything else.
See, red and green on the screen, I'm going to call it a churn, except NASDAQ up. It is a week of tech earnings. Tim and Carol this evening, I should say, with Meta earnings. It got to be as fascinating as what we saw from Tesla. From New York City, Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We have red and green on the screen. The S&P 500 up 0.3%. The Dow down 0.1%, but the Nasdaq holding strong, up 0.8%. The 2-year yield at 4.94%. That's little change. The 10-year yield at 4.64%. That's up 4 basis points. To commodity, spot gold lower at $2,320 an ounce. We have Brent crude $88 a barrel. WTI crude at $82 a barrel. And all eyes still on Tesla this morning after reporting yesterday. Rebounding from this 15-month low, Elon Musk starts restoring investor confidence. He's promising to accelerate the launch of cheaper models. Right now, their shares are up 11%. AT&T up nearly 2%. It topped profit estimates, so a notable increase in wireless subscribers. And finally, Boeing getting a much-needed push. They're up more than 1.5%. Quarterly results topped estimates across the board. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Greatly appreciated. Paul, there are like cool universities you wanted to go to. And I know it's hard to believe now, particularly for those younger, but on the beauty list of foreign schools to go to a long time ago was the American University of Beirut.
Right, exactly.
The cool kids went there. I didn't go there, but that was where you went. And that's where you got a grounding, because when I started foreign exchange, the Lebanese pound was one of the 3 or 4 strongest currencies.
Really? No kidding.
There were the Deutsche Mark, the Lebanese pound, maybe the dollar was 4th or 5th, I can't remember. And it's a world turned upside down. She has lived it. Jumana Berteschi joins us right now. I'm in a study to get her name right, like I am with Stevanovic as well.
Oh, yes, Stevanovic.
It's like great, you know.
It's a work in progress.
Jumana says if I have a martini, I do better with her name. She joins us now, and we are just thrilled that she will spearhead our Middle Eastern coverage. And I would say, Jumana, wonderful to have you here in New York and to see the launch of your show with Brad Hodson. And I've got to ask your perspective on the complete collapse of Lebanese society. You have lived it.
I have.
What's the new Lebanon look like? Give me something positive.
Okay, let me just qualify. I haven't actually lived the recent collapse, because the biggest downfall happened in the last couple of years, of course. And you talked about the strength of the Lebanese currency. For so long, it was pegged to the US dollar at a value of 1,500 lira to the US dollar. Of course, that has changed. It has. We've seen a huge decline in value. Not so long ago, it was trading at 100,000 Lebanese lira to $1. Yeah. We're back to 75,000 now. It's been that way for the last 12 months, which has allowed for some element of stability. But the point is, with a devaluation that big, what you're seeing is an economic decline, an unprecedented economic decline in the country. You've got 50% of the population living below the poverty line. And I think many people sort of look back nostalgically to the Lebanon of the 70s. And there's, every time I meet somebody in this country, they say, you come from Lebanon. It was once the crown jewel of the Middle East. It was the Switzerland of the Middle East. No longer. It's still a beautiful country, but unfortunately, we've got this economic situation, but then also the political instability, which we can talk about.
And missile attacks this morning at Hezbollah. To explain the distances here, I mean, this is what you do every day, but the distance from Tel Aviv to the southern Lebanon border up to Beirut, these are shockingly short distances.
Very short. It's very short. And let me just rewind back for 1 second. You know, when Friday happened, the Israel retaliation to the Iran attacks from the week before, the initial fear was that this was going to lead to an amplification of tensions within the region. But I think in the hours that came afterwards, it was clear that the Iranian side wanted to downplay what happened. And it was clear that the Israelis, who, by the way, still haven't officially taken responsibility because they usually don't, wanted to minimize the amount of damage that they caused. But they did want to send a message. And so it was a symbolic counterattack. And people thought, well, maybe that was the end of this tit-for-tat round between Iran and Israel. But what people are forgetting is there are other fronts. And the main other front right now that we need to be looking at and worried about is what is happening on the northern border of Israel and the southern border of Lebanon. You mentioned the short distance. So far, they've kept to the rules of engagement. There's been almost daily crossfire since October 7, but it's been within a 10-kilometer radius of the border.
6 miles.
Correct. Yesterday, Hezbollah went deeper into Israeli territory. They went about 12 miles in. In response to that, Today, the IDF have announced that they've targeted, I believe, more than 40 sites linked to Hezbollah facilities, weaponry, and also allegedly to Hamas sites as well, run in the southern part of the country.
Jumana, you are based in Dubai.
Yes.
Where you will be anchoring Daybreak Middle East and Africa for Bloomberg Television, a new show.
I don't want to give too much away, but we're going to give it a new name. But that's a surprise. Yes.
Fine.
That's
the
amazing.
Jumana Show.
Yeah, exactly. I'm all down.
Not
with,
called the Jumana
I
Show.
am down with that. From that part of the world, from that vantage point, how are they viewing what's happening in the Middle East today? Is it just? It's almost. I'm just wondering what the perspective is from that part of the world.
So within the UAE, you mean?
Yeah.
You have to remember that the UAE signed a normalization agreement with Israel back at the Abraham Accords, right?
Okay.
So technically, the UAE is not at a state of war with Israel. And whenever again, when October 7 happened, and everyone, of course, was struck by the horrific nature of the Hamas attack, the immediate question that came to mind is, what does this mean for the future of normalization between Saudi Arabia, which is the big one, and Israel? And of course, that has been put on hold ever since then. I think right now there is a lot of concern about the rising humanitarian toll and the number of civilian casualties within Gaza, but then also that there doesn't appear to be an end in sight, and a path towards this two-state solution that we talk about.
What is your breadth of Middle East? To me, it's my book of the year last year, Robert T. Kaplan's The Loom of Time. The Middle East is Morocco across all of Africa, over almost to the Stands, and even to Persia. And then I go south, Egypt, or maybe Sudan, but I go Egypt up to Turkey as well. Is that the breadth of your view from Dubai?
Absolutely. And you need to keep that in mind. I mean, Egypt front and center, it's the largest country in terms of population. It's the most populous Arab nation. 100 million people. 1/3 of the population are living on handouts from the government. The other 2/3 are living on partial handouts. It is a country that's going through a lot of economic turmoil as well. Add to the fact that they are on the Red Sea. All of those Houthi attacks on the ships is also impacting the Egyptian economy. It needs to be on our radar. Morocco, also one of the countries that signed the Abraham Accords a couple of years ago. So, all of this is very important. You've got Turkey up in the north. You've got Erdogan.
Okay, but does El-Sisi have stability now? We're hearing constructive things after the IMF bailout. Does El-Sisi have political stability?
He doesn't have, political stability often accompanies economic stability. So right now what he needs to do is get the economics right to stabilize the situation. It's difficult when you don't have tourism or the receipts from the transit. But he got a lifeline from the IMF. He got some help from the UAE as well. So they signed a deal. The UAE have plans to build up a tourism site on one of the seaports. So that should provide them with somewhat of stability when it comes to the currency in the next few months. But key to that, as ever, with any of these IMF programs, will they also enact the reforms that are necessary?
Thank you. Jumana, lovely to see you. Jumana Bertezzi with us, and of course, look for the start of her unnamed show.
To be named.
To be named at some point.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate it, and we'll have much more on that. Of course, a voice, a real focus on a larger Middle East than I think anyone's ever accomplished before. It's going to be really
I just think of the map that we see on TV, kind of Israel. That
exactly.
Part of,
I don't agree with that at all.
Yeah,
but you're right. You're 100% correct that it's. The Western look at this as three countries, and if we fly into Dubai, how many days are we there before we fly out? It's a much bigger setup. Paul, set up for Meta today. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to look at Mandeep Singh's preview work, and he specs another strong quarter, particularly coming out of top line. And I think the key issue for Meta is continued focus on cost. Hopefully, they don't talk too much about the metaverse. Hopefully that's something they can kind of put in their rearview mirror because that was really a drag on the stock here. So the top line story combined with the cost cutting, boy, that's been a great recipe for this company and for this stock. So more of the same. If you're a Meta investor, just kind of more of the same.
We're looking at some interesting things right now. I'm going to go to dollar yen, 154.99, 154.99, and 155 print. Not game changing, that's too much, but just to say interesting out there. I guess she's having a good week. She's got an album out that's new. Everybody's in an uproar. They're teaching college courses about it. You got to end with Taylor. Good morning.